1,000 years ago in ancient Japan, there was an old Zen monastery, and this monastery was holding what they call a sesshin, which is their enlightenment intensives. These are hardcore retreats that last 4 or 5 days where the monks go real hard for their enlightenment. And so they were doing this sesshin. They were all in the room together with the Zen master going at it hard, just beginning. And then this annoying little cat came into the room and started meowing and meowing and meowing incessantly. At first, they ignored this little cat, but it just kept meowing. Finally, the monks were getting agitated and disturbed and annoyed, and the Zen master, seeing this, told one of the young monks to go tie this cat outside in front of the monastery by the post out front so that it wouldn't sneak back in to disturb them again throughout this retreat. And so he did. And the session went on day after day, and that was a particularly fortunate, fortuitous session, very successful. More than usual monks got their enlightenments that session. Fast forward hundreds of years later, and there are many more monasteries in Japan. And this time, when they hold their session, as they do every year, all of them tie a cat outside the front door. And one young monk who was just new was tying this cat up, and then he asked the Zen master, why are you forcing me to tie this cat out outside? What is this going to do? And the monk said, the Zen master said, this is the cat of enlightenment. When we tie this cat outside, it causes more of the monks to have their enlightenments. So do as you're told. And he did as he was told. A little story. I don't know how true it is, but it's a cute little story to frame this topic that we're going to be talking about. Now, of course, happy Halloween. This is, of course, a Halloween special episode. I got the full getup for you here. I'm recording this on Halloween Day. I'm publishing and releasing this video on Halloween, and I've got the full getup for you. No expense has been spared. I even got the cane. In fact, this is not a costume. This is real. This is a real hat. It's not some cheap costume. This is a real shirt. This is a real scarf and a real wood cane. So this is going to be a serious topic, like all my Halloween topics are. There's not some gimmick here. The topic is as real as it gets, and the topic is conformity. So conformity is a trap. This is one of the biggest traps that you're going to fall into as you're pursuing your personal development and your spiritual work. So let's talk about this trap and what it entails, because there's a lot of meat to this bone. Conformity is a much stronger force than anyone understands. In general, of course, people understand the notion of conformity, but they don't understand how deep this really goes, and they are still under its effects, even when they think they have transcended it. So that's the trick here that we need to go deeper on. You do not understand how much conformity and groupthink and culture shape your view of reality. This is something that bears you sitting and contemplating and really appreciating, and it's going to take more than just contemplation. It's going to take observation from you. I'm going to help you to do that. You need to realize just how much culture of any kind limits your mind and your intelligence. Your mind is locked up. Your mind gets attached to culture, entangled with survival, with collective survival. And then this becomes, your mind becomes a blind defender of this culture, of this collective survival, and then you cannot think outside of this culture. There exist important and radical truths which I want to teach you, which I need to teach you, but I can't because your mind is simply too conformist. Because what your mind does is it judges the truth based on popularity and acceptance by others around you. You haven't been taught how to really evaluate truth in your life. What you've been taught through all of your education and your job and your career and your professional life is you've been taught to conform. And so you don't judge truth based on your direct consciousness the way that you should, the way that I want to teach you. Your mind, in other words, is not autonomous. You're judging truth based on how well it fits within what your culture has led you to expect is reasonable and rational. And appropriate and sane and normal. And this turns out to be a very wrong way to go about understanding deep truth. If you care about understanding reality deeply, if you care about genuine spirituality, which is what we're covering here, even if you care about things like science, because most of science is conformity. Most of people's entire worldview is just groupthink. They haven't sat down and thought it through deeply. Consider this, the only reason you have the worldview that you do is because of the place and time that you were born. It's incredible to me that people don't appreciate this and don't see this. They have their religion, they have their political belief system, they have their opinions about dating or about sexuality or about family, and they think that these ideas and opinions that they have, that this is somehow something truthful or genuine or authentic to them, as though they developed these ideas. You didn't. The only reason you believe these things is because of where you were born and when you were born. Really, like, it's so simple, but people don't get this. You need to actually see that most of your worldview, including science and materialism and your belief systems, all of that, it's just, you have to recognize that it's just programming. It's just programming. And the critical insight for you here is this. There's going to be many critical insights, but here's one of the first ones, and one of the most important ones of this episode, is that conformity isn't just something people do. Conformity is a stage of cognitive development. Here, we're going to be referencing my past work. I have a 3-part series called The 9 Stages of Ego Development. It presents a developmental model of ego development by Suzanne Cook-Greuter. And if you remember that series, that's a very powerful series. Go watch that if you haven't seen it. But if you remember, there's a stage there that's called the conformist stage. The conformist stage is basically a mind that only works by programming that it got from its culture and then defending that. That's the conformist stage. It doesn't know how to think independently. It doesn't know how to assess and evaluate reality independently, how to investigate reality independently, or how to make discoveries, new discoveries about reality independently. And this is like 50% of the world population is at the conformist stage or lower. But it gets worse because you might say, well, Leo, I'm beyond the conformist stage. I'm way beyond that. Okay, fine. Even if you're at a higher stage, even if you're at there's a stage called autonomous stage, even if you're at the autonomous stage, your mind is still not truly autonomous. To develop true autonomy of mind is such a rare thing. This is what I want you to understand. It's such a rare thing that virtually nobody in society has it. Less than 1% of people have it or have ever had it in all of human history. That's how rare it is. And the further back you go in history, the more rare it is. You are born and you survive in a collective. You do not think original thoughts. You parrot whatever your collective requires for its survival. That's the key thing you need to start to see. This is not just something you hear and then you believe. This is something you need to observe. You need to observe that this is true in your life with everybody around you, including yourself. And one way you can start to observe it is think of how conformist kids are in school. Children and teens think that conformity is a virtue. Being accepted by their friends, being cool, fitting in, being popular. Remember, just think back when you were in school and you were going through elementary school and high school, how all of those dynamics played out. Maybe you were successful in that game of popularity, or maybe you weren't, and then you were kind of bitter and resentful about it. But either way, it was a game you played and you had to, even if you failed at it, you still played at it because it was so fundamental to your survival and to your mental development. But of course, it didn't end after high school. It carries on into the adult world. It carries on into university, carries on into academia, carries on into the business world, into Wall Street, carries on into government. It doesn't go away. You are like a creature still connected by an umbilical cord to its collective. The collective is your mother, and you're still connected to it. And I want to show you how to go beyond that connection, how to sever that connection. What does that take? How do you do that? Well, This episode is laying the foundation for that. It takes years of work. It doesn't just happen over a weekend. So first, let's have you try to understand really what's going on here. You are born with a blank slate mind. Now, when I say blank slate, that doesn't mean that anything goes. The hardware of your mind, your brain and so forth, has a very certain structure. The genetics that you have give your mind certain biases and perspectives and so forth. But generally speaking, it's kind of like getting a new computer. Your computer has hardware, certain hardware limitations, but if you're getting a brand new computer with nothing on it, you can install any kind of software. And so in that sense, you got like a blank slate hard drive, completely empty hard drive. You can install whatever you want. But here's what happens is that you get conditioned and programmed by your culture for 20 years. The first 20 years of your life, you had no true independent thinking capacity. You didn't know how to evaluate what's true and what's false, what's real, what's unreal, what's fantasy, what's not fantasy. Plus, when you were very young, as a child, remember how fantastical and imaginative you were. You would play with toys and so forth, and you would get lost in fantasies. And so for 20 years, you don't have any capacity to do any kind of critical thinking or skepticism or contemplation or inquiry, and most people don't do it for the first 20 years of your life. And even beyond that, most people don't even do it 50 years into their life. But see, and then also what's happening is that this is the most formative time of your life. The first 20 years of your life is basically where the whole trajectory gets set. In the same way that, your crooked teeth, if you don't get your braces in the first 20 years of your life, you're going to have crooked teeth for the rest of your life. And it's going to be, the longer you wait, the harder it is to undo those crooked teeth. So it is with your mind. Except with your mind, you can't see it. With crooked teeth, it's so obvious. Everyone can see it. But when your mind is twisted on the inside, when you're programmed with all sorts of fantasies and illusions and bad beliefs, because you're part of this milieu from which you're getting programmed, you don't even notice it. That's the problem. And it's very, very difficult to start to see it. There is no limit, virtually no limit to the falsehood, fantasies, and absurdities that your mind can be programmed with and is programmed with. This is not just a maybe or a possibility. It already has been. It's just a question of which flavor of fantasy has your mind been programmed with. And once your mind is programmed, see, here's the next critical piece, is that you fall in love and you defend the programming. It's not just that a Christian has been programmed with Christianity, it's that the Christian has fallen in love with Christianity because they were programmed from such a young age that to them, it's like it brings in these, positive emotions and feelings of Christmas morning and then Easter Sunday and going to church and family and love and gifts and friendship and all of this positive stuff that a young child needs. All of this is now mixed together and entangled with the belief and ideology system of Christianity. And so now you think that you love being a Christian. But it's like Stockholm Syndrome is what it is. You're defending it, but you don't understand why you're defending it. You're defending it unconsciously. So the key insight here is that you fall in love with your bad programming, with your limited programming. Why is this programming bad? It's bad because it's limiting your mind. Your mind is capable of so much more than what your culture has programmed you with. And so the reason we need to have this conversation to start to deprogram your mind, free your mind of these various ideas, limiting ideas, is because your mind is capable of so much more. And what I want to teach you requires you to have an infinitely open mind. So that's what we're going for. Now, this whole conformity issue connects with the topic of self-deception, which we've talked about, of course, in the past. See my 3-part series called Self-Deception, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3. So much of self-deception, human nonsense, is just conformity. Just notice what self-deception really entails, where it comes from. Study where it comes from. Conformity makes fantasies, beliefs, perspectives, and paradigms feel more real than they are because you're just pinging off of everybody else. If she believes it and my professor believes it and the politician that I voted for believes it and my mother believes it and my grandmother believed it, then it's probably true. This is where everybody goes wrong, is thinking this way. You can't do genuine truth-seeking this way. You can't understand reality deeply in this way. The key insight is that you assume your worldview is true simply because everyone around you shares the same basic worldview, the same paradigm. Sure, you have small differences of disagreement, with your friends and family and so forth, but generally, most of you have the same paradigm, and that's really where the problem is. The problem is not with individual beliefs, it's with your entire paradigm. And through conformity, you will absorb all the limits and biases and problems of your culture and your time, your era. Breaking free of this programming and your culture is a monumental achievement. It's like breaking out of Earth's orbit. Very difficult to reach escape velocity with Earth's orbit because the gravity is so strong. Well, so it is with your collective culture, your society. Very few human beings have done it. That's what the autonomous stage is. And really, the autonomous stage in the Susan Cook-Reuter model, it's not enough. That's still really not enough to break out of what we're calling Earth's orbit here. I'm one of the few human beings who has broken out of Earth's orbit in terms of this with the mind. I also call it jailbreaking the mind. And so one of my deepest passions is teaching you how to jailbreak your mind, to truly break out of Earth's orbit beyond the autonomous stage. And then what you discover there in terms of your understanding of reality, that's some incredible stuff. Incredible stuff. But see, I can't even share that stuff with you very easily because the mind will shut it down. I spend a lot of my time thinking about how the audience's mind will just shut down some radical thing that I want to say. It's true. I know it's true. You can know that it's true, but I can't just directly communicate it to you because your mind will immediately shut it down because it doesn't fit with what your culture has programmed you with and told you is normal and okay. The default is conformity. Nobody gets to the autonomous stage, or never mind even going beyond. Just even getting to the autonomous stage, you're not going to get there by default, automatically, for free. This takes at least 2 decades of serious emotional development and cognitive development work, self-actualization work. Really, what I'm going to call true sovereignty of mind, capital S, capital M, sovereignty of mind, I only achieved that just within the last couple of years, at age 38. And that's counting the fact that I worked my ass off all through high school, through college, and then after that, and then over the last 15 years doing Actualized.org. So much cognitive work has been done, and it took me all the way to age 38 to really achieve full sovereignty of mind. That just shows you how much work there is to do here and how tricky this topic is. Conformity, if you're just going to do conformity, that's going to get you to the development level of the center of gravity of your society, whatever that is, spiral dynamic stage blue, orange, or green, one of those. It's going to probably be either blue or orange. Even green really is not going to happen without quite a lot of work from you. If you don't know what spiral dynamics is, go watch my series called Spiral Dynamics, which explains the different colors, blue, orange, and green. The higher stages of development that you wish to reach, the more rare it will be, and the more radical your view of your reality will become relative to the center of gravity of the collective organization, culture, or subculture that you are a part of. This is going to present you problems, and this is why so few people develop so highly, is because it's going to create friction for you in your family, in your community, in your church, in your business, corporation that you're a part of or that you manage, in your government if you're part of the government, in the military if you're part of the military. These are the real obstacles here. Here's another very critical thing to notice is that notice that all third world people, third world nations, lesser developed nations than the Western democracies, and tribal people, indigenous people, they're all completely lost in cultural conformity and groupthink. Muslims, Native Americans, all indigenous peoples, ayahuasca shamans in South America, all Orthodox religious people of every kind, whether it's Christian or Jewish or Hindu, Africans, African tribal people, the Japanese are extremely conformist. Asian countries are very, very conformist. Now, this might sound like I'm kind of being a little bit chauvinistic here. And you might say, well, Leo, look, you're judging all these different cultures very harshly from sort of the Western cultural perspective. And I'll address that in more detail here in a second. But really, this is not a judgment. This is an observation. I've watched hundreds of videos. I specifically take my time. I don't watch just like, fiction movies and stuff. I watch a lot of documentaries. I watch a lot of videos of people traveling to these indigenous places, Africa, rural parts of India and Asia. And like, I study this stuff quite deeply. I also read books about this kind of stuff, different cultures and so forth. And what's the one common thing, you watch enough of these videos, what's the one common thing you notice about all these indigenous people, all these lesser developed countries, is that they're just profoundly mired in conformity. These people cannot think outside of their traditions. All that they do is they are basically just tradition defending machines, and the traditions that they're defending, these are all just unconscious survival, collective survival habits and patterns. That's all that's really going on. And then with different flavors, right? The Africans have their flavors, the Japanese have their flavors, the Hindus have their flavors, the Jews have their flavors, and the Native Americans have their flavors. But they're incapable of actually questioning their culture, questioning their traditions. I mean, of course, a few of them are, but generally speaking, this is their situation, their condition. And then when you see that, it's almost like traveling back in time, because, we can't travel back in time 100,000 years and see what society was like, but you can go to the shamans in the Amazon, the ones that live very primitively there in the Amazon, and you can see how they live. And they still live the way that we lived 100,000 years ago. And you can talk to them and you can interview these people and you can interview their belief systems and you can interview and see what their spiritual ideas are and so forth. And how they even use, for example, ayahuasca and so forth. And what you're going to find is that they are very conformist about all of their traditions. They're not innovating anything. And this has been the situation with mankind for hundreds of thousands of years. This idea that mankind were these individuals who have individual motivations and beliefs and aspirations, and that, it's just me and my family, and, I'm going to live independently, and I'm going to have my own ideas, and I'm going to have my own intellectual world that I live in and that I develop. This is anathema to these cultures and to these peoples. And that's not an insult to them. Europeans were also the same way. In fact, most of Europeans still are this way. Many Americans still are this way. So I'm not saying that Europeans or Americans are better or anything like that. It's not about better or worse. It's just seeing the trajectory of development. What we're talking about is mental development, how the mind develops. And the development of the mind very much depends on the development of the culture. As the culture develops, the mind can develop alongside with it. See? So yes, there is such a thing as lesser developed cultures. That doesn't mean that they're bad or that they're wrong or that the particular flavor, right? I'm not saying that Japanese culture is less developed. That's not the thing. The thing is that look at what all of these cultures are. Why do Japanese have the culture they have? And why do Africans have the culture they have? And why do in the Middle East they have their culture? It's because these are the habits that were necessary for collective survival in these areas, in these geographies. And they're very specific to those geographies. Why the Japanese eat a lot of seaweed and sushi and stuff? Because that's where Japan is. It's a seafood-rich geography. In the Middle East, they don't have that because they don't have the rich seafood there. So obviously, they don't eat sushi in the Middle East. I mean, this is kind of obvious stuff, but so fundamental. So it's very important to see that even today, about 50% of the human race does not function autonomously. They function traditionally and conformistly. And this is actually where a lot of that's why conservative politics is such a powerful force, and why progressivism is, struggling to counteract all these fascistic and regressive conservative movements. It's because most people are just living conformistly by tradition. Just look at how insanely conformist human history is. If you've read any amount of human history, whether European or otherwise, it doesn't matter. what is the general big picture of human history? It's just conformity after conformity after conformity, one version of conformity after another, leading to absurdity and atrocity after another, after another, after another, after another. Collective survival, humans just barely scraping by collectively, century after century, millennia after millennia for hundreds of thousands of years. That's all of human history. And then the details of it are really irrelevant, whether it's World War I or World War II or the Napoleonic Wars or, the Chinese Wars in the Chinese Empire or the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans. What was all of that? It was all just conformist survival for the most part. People clinging to their traditions, fighting and defending their traditions, fighting over religion, fighting neighboring tribes, doing genocides. All cultures and societies at stage blue and below are so conformist that they're essentially incapable of serious intellectual work. Look at the Middle East. What kind of serious intellectual work can be done in the Middle East? In a country like Afghanistan, in a country like Syria or Iraq, or even in Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia is, it's developing rapidly. And I'm not saying that these nations and these cultures have to stay this way. They can all develop and they all will develop to European levels and beyond. So no issue there. This is not some sort of racist, argument that's being made here. We're talking about development. And so development is very, very real. And the more you travel around the world, especially if you don't just travel to Europe and developed parts, for tourism, but travel places in Africa, travel to the Middle East, travel to Afghanistan, travel to these kinds of places, the more dangerous, seedy, underdeveloped places, to really understand what's going on there. And there's, of course, a good reason why most Westerners don't want to travel there. It's not fun and glamorous because it's very underdeveloped. And it's dangerous. It's shady. Ugly stuff goes on there. It's not pretty to look at. And even if they do travel there, what they do is that they'll travel and they'll stay at some golf course resort, which is walled off from the slums and all that kind of stuff, from the underdevelopment. But look at the really underdeveloped areas. That's real travel. That will really grow you and develop you if you do that kind of travel, not just visiting the Eiffel Tower in Paris. That's bullshit. That's not going to develop you. So, what kind of intellectual development can there really be in Afghanistan? There isn't any. If it doesn't conform to Islam and to what some cleric or imam says, then at best it's not taken seriously. But more likely you're going to be severely punished for it. You're going to be ostracized. You're not going to be able to get a job. You're not going to be able to get a wife. You're literally not going to be able to get to reproduce if you have these kind of ideas. Try taking Actualized.org ideas and taking them to Afghanistan. See how that works for you. Now I say, well, Leo, but I love my culture. What's wrong with my culture? And see, that's the thing, is that you fall in love with your culture. That's the trap. The problem is that your culture is unconscious survival, and you don't even recognize that. Culture is deeply self-biased from the pressures of collective survival. So your mind gets infected with those biases rather than objective truth-seeking. And then those biases prevent your mind from really opening up and understanding reality, and yourself as well. Because, of course, you are reality. All the biases of your culture will infect your mind and your thinking process. These biases will prevent you from understanding reality in a deep way. Groupthink creates an echo chamber effect where contrary views are not allowed, and this results in collective fantasies and delusions that you mistake for reality. Ideas that challenge or contradict conformist norms are denied, demonized, rejected, and suppressed. This leads to a collective paradigm lock. See my episode, How Paradigms Work, for that concept of paradigm lock. But now, consider the alternative possibility. Imagine being able to think completely independently and beyond your culture. Imagine being able to think ideas that nobody in society has ever spoken of before, written books about before, talked about before. Truly original ideas. And notice also, this is very important, that this is distinct from awakening or enlightenment or mysticism. Because when you get into spiritual work, you might think, well, okay, Leo, so there's enlightenment or awakening, as you call it, and there's mystical experiences and all that. But then what about this cognitive development stuff you're talking about? Like how do those two connect and relate? Why do I need the cognitive development if I can just have my enlightenment? Well, the thing is that, yeah, you can have your enlightenment like 1,000 years ago in ancient Japan, the Zen masters had their enlightenments, very powerful ones, but they were still all very conformist in their cognitive development. So cognitive development and enlightenment, these are separate things. And in fact, what you'll realize is that most so-called enlightened or awakened people, or very mystical people, yogis and so forth, they are very low in their development cognitively and even morally, because they haven't really learned how to break out of their culture. They have achieved enlightenment within their conformist culture. Not because of their culture, but in spite of their culture. It's not that their culture is very conducive to producing enlightenment, no. Zen is very ineffective at producing enlightenment. Yoga is very ineffective at producing enlightenment. All these techniques and traditions are extremely ineffective. But still, some people succeed. Despite that, they still succeed. A few people succeed. But only a few, which is why less than 1% of the population, even knows what enlightenment is or has even heard of it. Now you might say, but Leo, isn't this just like your individualist chauvinism speaking from the Western male bias perspective? Like, what about different cultures? American culture is very individualistic, and it seems like you're speaking from that perspective, like as an individualistic American. But, we Russians or we Chinese or we Japanese, we're very collectivist. And, who's to say that individualism is better than collectivism? Isn't that all relative? Isn't that what postmodernism teaches us, not to judge other cultures in this chauvinistic way? Yes, that's true. And I'm not speaking against collectivism. I'm not putting forth some sort of libertarian worldview here where it's this hyper-individualism, kind of stage orange mindset. That's not what I'm talking about. There's definitely value to collectivism. And every society, American society, is also collectivist. This idea that there's some sort of inherent opposition between individualists and collectivists, this is nonsense. American conservatives sometimes paint it this way, but this is nonsense. You need a healthy balance between individualism and collectivism in any society. That's what every society has always been and will always be. So it's not like we're demonizing collectivism. However, when it comes to serious spirituality and truth, and those two are the same thing, you can't have serious spirituality without truth. When we're talking about truth, we're talking about truth-seeking. When we're talking about truth-seeking, this requires completely transcending human culture and humanity. God is beyond human culture. Truth is not a human invention like culture is. Beliefs, narratives, ideas, and knowledge can be had through conformity. Insight, consciousness, and stages of development and mystical experiences cannot be had through conformity. They're beyond that. Experience is not conformity. Why is spirituality so deeply misunderstood? After so many thousands of years, you would think, since the ancient Greeks and even the Egyptians, 10,000 years we've been doing spirituality. That's just recorded history. We've been doing it much longer. But just 10,000 years of recorded spiritual history. Why is it still so confusing for modern man? Why? This is why. Because spirituality is being turned into a cultural thing, into a cultural pursuit. And spirituality cannot work that way. Truth cannot work that way for very profound existential reasons. Conformity equals belief. Autonomous mind, autonomy is experience, consciousness, and insight. That's the difference. Remember my episode, What is Insight? Where we talked about that distinction. If you need a refresher, go watch that one again. Here's a key insight, is that insight can never be conformity. Insight is independent of culture. That's why insight is so valuable and powerful. It's independent of mankind. Although, of course, your culture gives you commonly discovered insights as beliefs. And in this way, it's actually very sneaky and dangerous because you can have genuine insights guided by culture. Your culture can teach you a technique like yoga. And then through yoga, you can actually have some kind of genuine insight. The genuine insight is distinct from the cultural technique of yoga that led you there. But you're going to confuse the two, and you're going to think, it's the yoga that I was doing in my Hindu culture, and the Hindu deities that I was taught as a child. That's what led me to the genuine insight. And you're going to connect these things. You're going to muddle them together, and then this is going to lead to a corruption of spirituality. Your spirituality is going to be much more particular rather than universal, because you're going to think that spirituality only works this one narrow way. Praying to my deity, praying to Allah in this particular way will lead me to this particular spiritual insight, and other ways don't work that way. See, this leads to very narrow formulations of spirituality, and ultimately it leads to much shallower insights. The insights are not the same. You might think, well, praying to Allah through Islam is just going to give me the same kind of insights that Leo is talking about. No, it won't. It won't. They're different insights. The insights that I'm sharing with you will be much more advanced than you will get from Islam, because Islam is a conformist system. And it's not focused on insight. It's focused on dogma, on conformity. That's a huge difference. And when your culture feeds you insights that you're supposed to have that can even lead to genuine insights, beliefs that turn into insights, that still subtly shapes your mind in negative ways and creates limits in your mind. Why? Because I can strongly shape your mind into whichever way that I want it to go for various nefarious purposes, or just to delude you by giving you genuine insights, but just by kind of like steering you towards these particular kinds of insights, but not those other kinds of insights. And this creates a kind of a frame, a kind of a box that you're going to be thinking in. That's kind of how science works. The relative truths within science, they're genuine relative truths in many cases, sometimes not, but in many cases they are. But science creates this kind of narrow, small frame that your mind then works within. And then once you've studied that long enough, your mind is so completely cemented with that frame that you can't think outside of it at all, because nothing else makes sense outside that frame. Why is this topic so important and fundamental? Because understanding reality, sense-making, which is what we're doing here, always, requires breaking out of conformity. This is necessary for serious contemplation. Contemplation will lead to radical insights and results which contradict your culture and mainstream dogma. This is bound to happen if you're doing serious contemplation. Understanding consciousness, metaphysics, and God requires radical, unorthodox, nonconformist thinking. This is necessary for innovation, for creativity, for leadership, for business, for invention, and exceptional results. We're going to get to some more of that practical stuff in the second half of this episode. Genuine philosophical, spiritual, and psychological work is about deriving ideas for yourself. It's not about reading books. It's about generating your own ideas, generating your own insights. And generating original ideas is rare and difficult. This is real work. This is the most difficult work that a human mind can do. It requires genuine creativity, intelligence, labor, courage. It takes courage to go against your culture and your society and your social groups. Recognize how rarely humans think truly original, independent, new ideas. It's very, very rare. Mostly what you see humans doing is they're just parroting ideas that they heard from somebody else. That's mostly what's going on. That's 99% of what's going on. When you're turning on a YouTube video, that's what's going on. When you're listening to a history, podcast, that's what's going on. When you're listening to political commentary, that's what's going on. When you're opening a science textbook at university, that's what's going on. Just humans parroting other humans. You're so immersed in this, you don't even notice it anymore. And it's very problematic because it limits your mind. How do you come to deeply comprehend reality? Obviously not through conformity. The ability to question and contradict your collective is fundamental. It's precious, it's rare. How do you develop this ability? That's what Actualized.org teaches you. Intelligence is the ability to question infinitely. Thinking through a topic all on your own from first principles, questioning every assumption. That's the real work. And here's a warning that I need to give you here. here's a critical insight, is that if you are highly intelligent, if you're in academia, if you're very rational, and you think, well, Leo, yeah, I already know this kind of stuff, cognitive biases, I've learned about those. Leo, yeah, I understand the problems with conformity, and I fancy myself kind of nonconformist anyways. So, Leo, I already know all this stuff. No, I got news for you. You have not yet achieved true sovereignty of mind. Your mind is not able to question all of society, all of culture, all of the assumptions, all of the frames, all of the paradigms. You're not able to do that yet. So you're not above this topic. This topic is for you. This is not a topic just for morons who believe in ghost stories and conspiracy theories. Although, of course, it is for those as well. So where does conformity exist and where does it apply? Let's go through a list of examples now. Of course, there's a lot. I have a very long list for you. First, let's begin with religion. All of religion is conformity. That's obviously the biggest problem with religion, is the horrendous conformity of it. Christians, evangelicals, churches, creationism, Christians liking to, demonize, call things satanic and Luciferian, talking about heaven and hell. They have no understanding of these things. It is just parroting ideas. It's all conformity. Islam in the Middle East. Islam in the Middle East is it's its own crazy, deep case study of conformity. I mean, if you want to understand conformity, the evils of it and the horrors of it and the ugliness of it, just look at underdeveloped regions in the Middle East. And I'm not trying to demonize the Middle East. I'm well aware that there's many intelligent and independent thinking people in the Middle East. I'm aware of the Islamic Golden Age and all this kind of stuff. So I'm not making a simplistic demonization of the Middle East here, but just you can't deny the insane conformity that's in the Middle East and how much that holds them back. And you can see that they're slowly working through it. Saudi Arabia and so forth. They're making their progress, but they're still very, very mired in this insane conformity. And the beautiful thing about that is that the way the Middle East is, the regressive ways in which the Middle East is, and I encourage you to study everything about the Middle East. Read history about the Middle East, read the books, watch all the documentaries about Afghanistan and Syria and Iraq, and watch all of it. Right? I share a lot of those on my blog. That's how mankind was. Everywhere. That's how Europe was. That's how America was. That's how the Native Americans were. This is not picking on the Middle East. The Middle East is just a little bit, it's just like 100 years back in its development. It's just a matter of time. But in the grand, geological scale, it's nothing. This 100 years is nothing. But this is how mankind really, truly is. And then once you understand that phenomenon and that dynamic, that pattern, it's a cognitive pattern. Once you see it in the Middle East, you're going to see it in the Christians, and you're going to see it in the Israelis and the Zionists, and then you're going to see it in the Americans, right? And you're going to see it in the conservatives all around the world. And then you're even going to see it in the communists and the Marxists and the progressives. You're going to see it everywhere. We're getting to those, don't worry. We're not done with the religion yet. What about the Mormons? Pure conformity. Mormonism is pure conformity. Jehovah's Witnesses, pure conformity. Scientology, pure conformity. Quakers, Shakers, Mennonites. Look, I've shared documentaries about the Quakers and the Shakers. And these people, you watch these people, they live these simple traditional lives. And in a sense, they're living these pure stage blue values of hard work and not using technology. And in a sense, it's kind of noble. And of course, there's admirable things about all these cultures and all these traditional ways of life. However, you look at how they educate their children. How do they educate their children in the Middle East? How do the Quakers and Shakers educate their children? Look, these people are incapable of having original ideas. They're incapable of innovation. They're just blindly traditional. And what's more is that they don't understand that. See, they don't understand that about themselves. All of these traditional people who defend tradition, they get very prideful about defending their tradition. But what they don't understand is that their tradition is like a virus that has hijacked their mind. They don't understand that. They fall in love with the virus. They don't see that they are just being a collectivist survival automaton. That's what they are. They're survival zombies. That's what a Shaker is. That's what a Quaker is, regardless of anything else. It doesn't matter the details. It doesn't matter if you're Japanese or Chinese or Middle Eastern or Islamic, or if you're Zionist or Orthodox Jew or Orthodox Christian. It doesn't matter. It's all the same thing. It's all the same thing, just different flavors of the same bowl of ice cream. If you're religious, really notice this. Like, I want you to seriously, like, this is so serious. Right here, if you could just get this one thing, this will unleash your whole mind, but you won't get it. But I'll throw it out there for you. Notice, truly notice, if you really take the time to self-reflect very honestly, without any biases, very honestly, you want to get to the truth. Here's the truth about your religion. The only reason you believe in Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism is conformity. There is no other reason. There's no other reason. There's no other reason. That's the only reason. If you're courageous and brave, sit down on the couch and keep contemplating what I just told you. Keep contemplating until you finally realize you have the insight. Oh my God. My entire religion is just conform. That's all that it ever was. That's all that it is. That's all Christianity is. It's just conformity. Woo! When you have that insight, oh my God. Wow. That's jailbreaking your mind. Wow. Zionism, Orthodox Judaism. Look at the conformity of it. Look at videos of Orthodox Jewish Zionists, the settlers. I'm talking about the hardcore settlers, hardcore, the extremist settlers in Israel. And I'm not saying all Israelis are that. I know it's a small segment. I know that it's an extremist group. But just look at how they think. Watch interviews with them. There's this Zionist lady, Daniela Weiss, I think her name is, just this crazy, radical, rabid, she's not Orthodox, but she's a Jewish Zionist there in Israel. Just look at interviews with her. The conformity of it. These people cannot think outside of their Zionist Jewish programming. They can't. They're hijacked by it. And they don't see that. They don't have the self-reflection to see it. And they don't see how that's limiting their mind, that's limiting their life, that's limiting their government, that's limiting how they interact with other fellow human beings. They literally cannot have relationships with other races and ethnicities because of that. That's how limiting it is to the mind. Talk about limiting the mind. The rabid Jewish Zionists in Israel, the settlers, they're just the perfect case study in what I'm talking about here with conformity and all of its limits and problems. Look at the cultures traditional cultures in Japan, China, Korea, Asia, Russia, Africa. Look at how conformist it all is. Look at the phenomena of ethnocentrism, nationalism, various kinds of stereotypes. All cultures have various stereotypes that they make of other cultures and things. These stereotypes are very conformist. The phenomena of demonization and scapegoating. This is very conformist. Racism, xenophobia, anti-immigration. What is all this? It's all conformity. So I'm presenting this list of very specific things. It's a gigantic list. This list is basically all of human life, is this list. But what I want you to see is that the details of these specific examples don't matter. What matters is the general trend that it's all just conformity. And once you can zoom out enough and get detached enough to see it as just conformity, this allows you to then step outside of it and then to transcend it. That's the key. Look at all indigenous cultures, all folk cultures. Every single country in the world has indigenous folk cultures, whether it's Shinto religion in Japan or various kinds of animistic religions in Africa or in rural China or even in Russia. They all have this. The Native Americans in America have this. Look at all of the entire phenomenon of traditionalism, people defending their traditions. What is that about? Why are you defending a tradition? Why are you in love with a tradition, a human invented tradition? Whether it's wearing your clothes a certain way, drinking ayahuasca or taking peyote a certain way, in a certain style, in a certain ceremony, where it's wearing a certain kind of hat, whether you're the Pope or you're the Tsar or whatever, or you're the Emperor of Japan. People don't think critically about these traditions. They just defend them because their survival depends upon it. But if you're serious about understanding reality, you have to start to question the traditions. And this is exactly what conservatives don't want to do. The entire conservative worldview and attitude towards life is to blindly defend tradition without questioning it, seriously. Because if you seriously question a tradition, you would actually transcend it. And that's exactly what the conservative doesn't want to do. How about arranged marriage or views on sex? Whatever views you have, you might have very conservative views on sex, where you believe like no sex before marriage, or you might have very libertine views of sex, where it's gay sex all the way and 20 different genders and every day and all this kind of stuff. Anything you want goes with whoever you want. Regardless of whether you're conservative or liberal about that, your views, notice where those views came from. If you have very liberal views about sex, it's because that's the culture you grew up in, most likely. And if you have very conservative views about sex, then that's also conformity. Very few people have consciously created views about sex themselves, consciously. The problem with it being a tradition or a culture is that it's not conscious, you see. And everything we're doing in this work, all spirituality is about consciousness. It's about increasing your consciousness rather than being unconscious and doing things unconsciously, behaving like an animal. Every culture has different kinds of norms. Japan has certain kinds of norms of etiquette, how to hold your chopsticks, how to bow properly, how to hand a business card. In Japan, you don't hand a business card with one card. You have to do it, with one hand. You have to do it with both hands. It's supposed to be more polite. These kinds of little norms, right? You just do them. How about traditions like celebrating birthdays and Christmases and Easters and Hanukkahs and whatever holidays, 4th of Julys and so forth, whatever you got. Ramadans and Kwanzas and so forth. What is all this? Why are you even doing this? See, people just do it. They don't even question it. Thanksgiving. Why? Of course, Halloween. The irony is not lost on me that I'm doing a conformist Halloween dress-up thing here. Look, the bottom line is that you're not going to escape conformity completely. You're living in a culture. You don't want to take this too seriously to the point where you're just avoiding stuff just for the sake of avoiding it. If you enjoy your Halloween, enjoy your Halloween. But really, how attached are you to it? Have you transcended it? Is it still limiting your mind? Wearing a Halloween costume does not limit my mind. My mind is infinitely open. Wearing this costume doesn't hurt that. In fact, it's kind of an expression of that, tongue in cheek. Because the more your mind is open, then the more you transcend the seriousness of these conformist traditions, then the more playful you can be about it. Conformity in dating. In even how you have sex, in what you expect out of relationships and even marriage. Conformity within family life, how you expect your family to go. How about conformity in politics, government, war, revolutions? These are very conformist events. Political movements like populism, fascism, communism, Christian nationalism, theocracy. This is all conformity. Propaganda, it's all conformity. How about intelligence agencies, the CIA, the way that intelligence agencies operate, the military-industrial complex, military culture? What is all that? Conformity. The abortion issue. Conservatives, Christians who have a problem with abortion. Why do you have a problem with abortion? Abortion is not even banned in the Bible. Abortion even exists in the Bible. It's not demonized in the Bible. The idea of Christians being against, Christians, they act, there's almost this performative element. Christians are so outraged by abortion. It's like, oh my God, you're killing babies. But it's like, they have not even enough, they don't even have an ounce of self-awareness to realize that this is just cultural programming, nothing else. If you were a Christian 200 years ago, you wouldn't care about this. You would have been an even more Orthodox Christian than you are today. Because see, Christians today, they're all like anti-abortion. but then they drink, they have sex before marriage, and they do all this other kind of stuff. They vote for a monster like Trump. No problems there, voting for a monster like Trump. But then they're so outraged over the atrocities of abortion. The bottom line is that Christians 500 years ago, they didn't give a fuck about abortions. This is a very modern phenomenon. It's a cultural fad. That's all that it is. It's nothing else. Now, even though I say that, I'm not saying that we should have unlimited abortion per se. And you can have a legitimate anti-abortion position. But what I'm saying is that the Christians who are anti-abortion, they do not have a legitimate anti-abortion position. That's just conformity, right? So I'm not actually making a judgment where I'm saying that abortion is good or that you shouldn't be against abortion. If you want to be against abortion, but don't do it out of conformity. Do it out of a conscious, deliberate, insightful process that you yourself did. And that's very difficult to do because what you're going to want to do, see, a Christian's going to say, well, yeah, Leo, okay, I agree with you. So I sat down and I thought through and, I prayed to God and then he told me that abortion is wrong. And so therefore I did what you said, Leo, and I'm really anti-abortion because I had a true insight into the fact that abortion is wrong. No, you didn't do that. What you did is you did a backwards rationalization. Your culture already programmed you that you're supposed to hate abortion and abortion is evil and bad and wrong. And then you just, in the back of your mind, that's what you truly believe. And then you went through some rationalizations and some sort of like fake process to have some insight to kind of align your ideas with what I'm saying here so that you could say, yeah, Leo, my views on abortion genuinely are my own and not just cultural programming. And what I'm saying is that that's a self-deception. You didn't actually transcend abortion, this abortion issue. You didn't have the insight. You didn't realize that it's cultural programming, right? What I'm talking about is seeing it very deeply, very, very deeply. You have to see it. If you actually see it, you will detach from it. You won't care. And now you're going to say, oh, Leo, but what about morality? It's immoral. See, but your entire moral system is what? It's conformity. Where did you get all your ideas of right and wrong, good and bad and evil? From your culture. And what's really difficult to do is to get someone to sit down and to actually go through the process of genuinely questioning their ideas of right and wrong. Not in a performative way, where you sit down, you question it, the way that kind of like Rene Descartes did. He sat down in the meditations, he questioned he sort of like wanted to question everything he knew. He wanted to question from scratch. But in the end, after he questioned it all, he just came back to exactly the same conclusions, his Christian conclusions that he had at the very beginning. So it was all for naught. It was all just a mental masturbation. If you really do the process, it should leave you not a Christian anymore. It should leave you not a Muslim anymore. That would be really doing the process. But see, of course, that's exactly what you don't want because you're so attached to it. You're in love with whatever you're attached to. Woke versus anti-woke. Both wokeness and anti-wokeness is conformity. In fact, anti-wokeness is more conformity than wokeness. That's something the anti-woke people don't realize. They don't have enough self-awareness to see this. Yes, of course, wokeness is conformity. But anti-wokeness is an even lower form of conformity. See, what we have is we have competing sets of conformities in politics. Left conformity and right conformity. MAGA, look at Trump's MAGA rallies. Look at the interviews with the MAGA people. They're just so insanely conformist, it's comical. You can hardly believe these people are real. The KKK groypers, these Pepe the Frog memes, what is all that? Conformity. Socialism, Marxism, what is all that? Conformity. Now see, it's very tricky because as a leftist, you're going to say, yeah, Leo, I agree with you. The conservatives are very conformist. But we leftists, we take our gender studies classes and we are real students of Karl Marx, real scientific political analysis and economics and all this. And so, that's not conformity. That's real like scientific, philosophical stuff, heavy intellectual stuff, Marxist Das Kapital. That's a serious, heavy work to read and to understand. And yeah, you're a little bit better. But, and the Marxists will say, well, no, Leo, capitalism is what's conformity. Marxism is not conformity. That's the antithesis of the conformity. No, all of Marxism is conformity. Socialism is conformity. And capitalism is conformity. The problem is much deeper than you think. Progressives and leftists, people like Hassan Piker, TYT, that's conformity. Their audiences, look at their audiences, it's very conformist. And I'm not saying that he's wrong or that they're wrong on certain positions. They have good positions, they have good analysis sometimes, but look at how conformist their audiences are. Even the label leftist, when you label yourself a leftist, where'd you get this idea of leftist? What is a leftist? Where'd you get these ideas? Every single idea you have in your mind, you need to do an audit, go through it, literally track down where every single idea in your mind came from. You're going to realize none of them came really from you. Even the word progressive, where did that come from? You didn't come up with it. What does it mean? You didn't come up with that. Environmentalism, that's very conformist as well. These various kinds of movements, there's like a degrowth movement, what is it called? Extinction Rebellion or something like that. There's various kinds of like far left, anti-climate, sort of climate activist movements where they, throw cans of soup on Van Gogh paintings and whatever, do kinds of vandalism and other kinds of stuff like this, Greenpeace, this kind of stuff. This is all conformity. This is not genuine original thinking. College campus political activism. Yeah, that's all conformity. Gender ideology, gender studies, all conformity. Postmodernism, very, very conformist. It's one of the biggest problems about it. How about the Red Scare, anti-communism that happened in America in the 50s, 60s, and so on? Conformity. The entire Overton window in politics. What's considered center? That Overton window, both sides, or left and right, are fighting over that Overton window. That entire Overton window, whichever way it swings, all of that is conformity. And even centrism, what's considered centrism, that's also conformity. Look at the conformity in our news media organizations, how they operate. It doesn't matter if it's Fox News or CNN or MSNBC, all of it is conformity. Now, Fox News has the worst form of it, but CNN has it too. MSNBC has it too. Look at the groupthink on Israel, the US media on Israel. Money in politics. Look at the both sides stuff that they do, that CNN does. All of that is conformity. Newsrooms like CNN, or the whole what's his name, Noam Chomsky's manufacturing consent. That whole idea, he's describing conformity. But it's funny because there's a double conformity. The notion of manufacturing consent, that itself now has become a thought-terminating cliche, which is now also conformity. Noam Chomsky himself has now been used and co-opted by the left as a form of conformity. They'll just quote some Noam Chomsky as though he's the authority on everything. Basically, all political analysis that you see on YouTube and on social media, all of it is just conformity. There's no serious thinking there. How about the Iraq War? The reactions post 9/11, the war on terror, views on terrorism, all of that is mired in conformity. And that's why it's so bad. It's so bad intellectually. It's such poor sense-making, the way that America reacted after 9/11. Just idiotic sense-making is what it was, led by Bush and Cheney and all of those goons. But it wasn't just them. It can't just be blamed on them. I remember that time very well. The zeitgeist was such that it was one of these mass, collective delusions, the war on terror. Look at Washington, D.C. culture, the deep state, as they call it, intelligence agencies. Now, of course, it's funny because on the right, in MAGA world, deep state has now become its own specialized term of conformity, just like the way they call everything a deep state. And that they demonize the deep state. They don't even understand what the point of bureaucracy is, why bureaucracy exists, the values of the deep state. They don't understand any of that. So there's an illegitimate notion of the deep state that they have on the right, but then there's a legitimate version of the deep state, which is that, yes, of course, there's a massive bureaucracy in every government. That's what the deep state is. And of course, it can do nefarious things. It can do things against, the president's wishes because the government is never run by one person. There's a giant state. And then people on the right, they don't understand that, which is why they're authoritarian. They think that The government is and should be run by a single, person top down. But just Washington, D.C. culture is so conformist. Everybody in the Senate, in the House, all the senators, all the representatives, all the politicians, they're so insanely conformist. They do what their constituents, nag them to do, or what their donors nag them to do, or pay them to do, or whatever's beneficial, for their winning some election. All of that is conformity. Empire, American empire, that's conformity. Why do we have empire? Only because of conformity, because no one's really questioning it. The politicians aren't questioning it. The deep state isn't questioning it. Now, libertarianism, you think, well, Leo, the solution is libertarianism. That's the antidote to all this conformist politics, right? No, because every libertarian is purely conformist. There's no such thing as a truly deep-thinking libertarian. It's all conformity. Our legal system is very conformist. The way judges behave, the way they do sentences, the way they prosecute drug crimes and weed crimes and so forth. Of course, conspiracy theories, you might say, well, Leo, the answer to politics is to get into conspiracy theories. No, all conspiracy theories are conformity. The fake moon landing thing, the Pizzagate stuff, the QAnon stuff. What is all this? This is just pure conformity. Flat Earth stuff, Jews ruling the world sort of stuff. Weird Epstein conspiracy theories. This sort of fixation on going after child abuse, sexual child abuse, but it's not really going after it. You're not really solving it. It's just you're demonizing your enemies as perverts. This is all conformity. Look at internet culture. Internet culture is just like spreading conformity like a wildfire these days, especially with the online platforms and their algorithms, social media, all of it. All you see across Twitter, social media, X, comment sections everywhere, Reddit, Discord, all of this stuff. What is all this? Online forums. It's all conformity. It's all run on conformity. Memes, virality, Instagram stuff. The kind of debates you see, these online debates, debate bro culture, conformity. Why are you even having debates? Why are you doing this? Conformity. Popular social media influencers like Mr. Beast, PewDiePie, these kinds of people. What is that? Conformity. Why do people like them? How about Silicon Valley conformity? Investing. You think, well, yeah, it's like the stupid low classes that are doing conformity. It's like, the elites are not doing conformity. Yes, they are. Elites are completely doing, look at Silicon Valley. The people can't think independently. All this AI hype that they're doing. Pure conformity. NFTs, crypto stuff. All of it is conformity. What about podcasters? It's just a giant conformist circle jerk of podcasting. Doing these podcast circuits, people traveling around, different podcasters talking about nonsense and conspiracy theories. What is this? How about the manosphere? Red pill, black pill, incels, MGTOW, pickup. It's all conformist as well. Toxic masculinity, young men unconsciously imitating and conforming to norms set by guys like Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate himself is very conformist. Chasing after your Bugattis and your multiple girlfriends. What is this? It's just conformity. How about business culture? Businesses and corporations are deeply, profoundly mired in conformity. This whole capitalist machine of profit maximization culture, it's a culture that runs through all the top companies. It's conformity. HR culture, PR culture, the conformity to climb the corporate hierarchy, earn your stock options, gain social status, marketing and advertising. Look at YouTube sponsorships. It's all conformity. Have you seen the same couple of handful of YouTube sponsorships are all across all of your channels that are not even related to each other? What is it? It's all some stupid NordVPN, some BetterHelp, some other scam nonsense. People are not even original in how they do sponsorships for their YouTube channels. They don't even have enough independent thinking to find an original sponsor. They just find the sponsor that everybody else does. NordVPN. I mean, see, once you start to see what I'm talking about, it's like, oh my God. It's like nobody in society is having any original thoughts at all. It's like one original thought per million. That's the ratio. And none of them is aware of it. You see, when some Silicon Valley venture capitalist is, running around, working late into the night, burning the midnight oil to fundraise $100 million into some super AGI company investment, he's very excited about it. He doesn't perceive that entire thing as just one act of conformity. He doesn't see that. He doesn't see that his entire venture capital career is just conformity. Why did he go into that career? Why is he still doing it? Why does he care about it? Why does he care about AGI? It's not because he sat down and deeply thought through his own values and what he looked at society and he said, okay, what does society need? What do I need in my life? What are my values? What should be society's values? How does this relate to spirituality and what's healthy for society? And then what should I do about that? And then what kind of, investments should he didn't do that. He's operating like a machine. And it doesn't matter how many millions or billions he has. It doesn't matter if it's Elon Musk. He's operating like a machine. Your hundreds of billions aren't going to save you from this problem because this is in your mind. This goes so deep. Look at the conformity on Wall Street, investing trends, crypto hype, bubbles, pump and dump schemes. The whole Tai Lopez phenomenon, what is that? He's still, 10 years later, still doing the same pump and dump schemes that he was doing back in his garage 10 years ago. Nothing has changed. Now he's going to prison, maybe. I hear. The government is after him from doing some scam, some latest scam, crypto scam or whatever it was. You see? Yeah, I knew Tai Lopez. I met Tai Lopez before he did his whole garage scam thing, back before he blew up on YouTube 10 years ago. I knew him. I didn't know him personally, but I went to an event where he was a speaker. Yeah, it just brings back memories. It was a pickup event, by the way. So yeah, pickup, extremely conformist. Extremely conformist. The kind of stuff that RSD does, very, very conformist. So here's the trick of it, is that, see, RSD, if you're not familiar, RSD was a pickup company. It still kind of exists, but it's not called that anymore, led by Owen Cook. But see, RSD presents itself as this very anti-matrix, and Andrew Tate does this too. Sort of, Andrew Tate is like breaking out of the matrix. I'm going to help you break out of the matrix. And RSD also presents itself that way. Owen Cook also does that too. It's like very sort of like niche, radical, anti-mainstream. And you get into that and you think, like, oh, finally, I've discovered something that's alternative to the matrix. And the matrix is just the mainstream stuff. And then usually when you're doing the alternative stuff, you've got some more fringe politics, some more fringe kind of like edgy view on women, on sex, on relationships, some edgy views on edgy lifestyles, edgy views on business, this kind of stuff. It's more guerrilla sort of, guerrilla, more underground, more sort of like Fight Clubby. But it's a subculture. And this subculture, you think that you're being nonconformist and that you're really being autonomous. You're not. All of the people in RSD, they don't have true sovereignty of mind. It's still conformity. It's still materialism, and it's still, chasing after women, and it's misogyny, and it's toxic masculinity, and all that. It's not the same as the level that I'm trying to get you to in terms of development. Even though there's room for that, right? So at a certain point in your life, that can be useful. But then remember, it's going to limit your mind. And so it's like you use it for a few years, then you got to transcend it. If you get stuck on it for 10, 20 years, that's when it becomes a problem. So please don't misunderstand me. I'm not trying to demonize all this stuff. There's appropriate places for many of these things in your development as you're developing. But you have to understand my bias. My bias is like I'm trying to get you to the most advanced understandings of reality possible. So in order to do that, we have to speed through this other stuff, right? And we have to recognize its limitations very quickly so we don't get hung up on it, because your life is pretty short. If you spend 10 years hung up on pickup, and then 10 years hung up on Wall Street, and then 10 years hung up on MAGA politics or whatever, that's 30 years gone. And then it's too late. Too late. And remember, these ideas, they get lodged in your mind for a long time. It's very difficult to undo. Once you're programmed with it, it's very difficult to undo it. The solution to all this stuff is to not program it in the first place, but that's most people are already programmed with it. Your ideas of success, how you define success, is mostly defined by your culture. What is success? Where'd you get your ideas for success? How about conformity in various kinds of industry? No matter what kind of industry, if you're a part of the oil industry, oil and gas industry, military industrial complex industry, if you're part of the marketing industry or the health care, the supplement industry, whatever industry you're part of, it doesn't matter. There's going to be conformity and groupthink in that industry. That's going to hold you down, limit your mind, limit what you're able to create, new things you're able to develop within that industry. There's going to be sort of a frame or a paradigm that every industry sets on you, whether it's Hollywood, game industry, music industry. How about health, nutrition, diets, and fitness? There's a lot of conformity going on with diets, nutrition, fitness. Your gym routine. Look at your gym. Where did you get your gym routine? It's probably conformity, isn't it? Wim Hof breathing, conformity. Supplements and medicines, this anti-vax stuff, it's all conformity. Anti-vax is just pure conformity. And the devil in it is that the anti-vax people think that they're being original and deep thinkers, and that they're really studying and really doing their own research, and they're really being nonconformists because they're challenging the mainstream. No, that's conformity. How about also conformity in Western medicine? Yes, the anti-vax people are correct. There's also conformity in just traditional Western medicine. The traditional for-profit, illness industrial complex that we have, run by insurance companies and big pharma, of course that's also conformity. But the one doesn't negate the other. And when you add one on top of the other, which is what anti-vax is, you get a double dose of conformity. It really screws you up. And then, of course, there's a lot of conformity in New Age alternative medicine. And once you get into New Age alternative medicine, that's why there's an overlap between the left-wing New Age people and the right-wing anti-vax people. There's an overlap between the left and the right anti-vaxxers, because they're both getting sucked into the conformity of the sort of New Age alternative medicines. Fueled by what? Usually health problems. You have some kind of health problem and Big Pharma doesn't help you, then you have to go look elsewhere. I've been through that journey myself. I've looked at a lot of various alternative New Age medicine sources and so forth that have not worked for me. And I've also looked at very conventional Big Pharma sources, and they also haven't helped me. And then also they did. They also have helped me. So it's a mixed bag. There's no easy answer here when it comes to healthcare. No easy answer. Neither side is right per se. It very much depends on the situation. How about circumcision? What is circumcision but conformity? I mean, if you just want a crystal clear example of conformity, it's circumcision. There's absolutely no reason to mutilate the genitals of young boys, and yet it's done across the world. And look at the double standard here. When it's done to women, oh my God, that's child abuse. When it's done to boys, no one even bats an eye. Why? Conformity, pure conformity. Where did it even come from? Where did you even get the idea? See, if you're going to have a child, and then you're going to have to decide, circumcision or not, in that moment, I want you to actually sit down and think, where did I even get the idea of circumcision? Like, that's a crazy fucking idea. How about drug culture, drug use? There's a whole subculture to drugs, especially smoking weed these days. Now, a lot of it's been recreationalized and legalized. But also the culture of drinking, smoking, tobacco, coffee, intoxicants, opioids. All this is conformity. Why do you drink? Why do you smoke? Why do you vape? Why do you do opioids? Various kinds of coffee. Why do you do coffee? Why do you do your Starbucks? Conformity. It's all conformity. Psychedelics, there's a lot of conformity within the psychedelic industry and psychedelic field. And I've been challenging a lot of that conformity and getting some pushback about that, which is good and healthy. But there's a lot of dogma within psychedelics. The right ways to do psychedelics, the wrong ways to do them. A lot of times people will, I love this, when they parrot to me like, the Alan Watts quote of like, when you've heard the message, hang up the phone. What is that? You're just parroting conformity. Have you actually explored the whole psychedelic terrain? Have you done dozens of different psychedelics to see whether you actually got the message. Maybe you didn't get the message yet. Maybe the message is still ringing for you and you've already hung up the phone. Ayahuasca shamans. You know, these ayahuasca shamans, they get very attached to their traditions, their particular ways of doing things, and then they start to demonize synthetic psychedelics. They say, oh no, synthetic 5-MeO DMT, that's not as good as from the toad. The toad is the real one. The ayahuasca is the real one. And Leo, if you do DMT, if you just smoke DMT, that's not as good as ayahuasca. Leo, have you taken ayahuasca? Leo, you got to take ayahuasca because it's different. It's better. It's more spiritual. It's more natural. It's just pure conformity. I've discovered insane psychedelics that these shamans can't even dream of. They're so much more powerful, so much more effective than drinking that nasty ayahuasca sludge. The dosages are more precise. The methods are better. Combining the methods with the theory that I've developed as well is much more powerful than just, handing people cups of ayahuasca in in the middle of some rainforest. Pure synthetic psychedelics are so much better than eating mushrooms or chewing on a peyote cactus. I mean, it's just barbaric compared to the kind of techniques that I've been able to develop and find. But why? Why was I able to find those techniques? Because I truly am open-minded and I'm experimenting and trying stuff. Which brings us to New Age spirituality, chakras and yogas of various kinds, and law of attraction and synchronicities and heavens and hells and gurus and astral projections and travels and all this kinds of stuff, angel numbers and whatever people make up. Most of New Age is conformity. The self-help industry is very conformist. Notice how shallow most self-help teachings and videos are and courses. Extremely, kind of like stuff that Tony Robbins does. Extremely conformist. The book publishing industry, very conformist. The bestseller lists and so forth, very conformist. How about conformity among celebrities and elites and the rich and powerful? The upper class, the ruling class, very, very conformist. Conformity in Hollywood. The derivative sequels and the milking of brands that are, why is Hollywood going down the tubes? Why is the quality of Hollywood movies since the 70s and 80s and 90s has been dropping? Because it's this devolution into pure, more and more efficient ways of marketing and branding. That's what it is. It's just this hyper-capitalism. And nobody in Hollywood has the independence of mind to question it. I mean, a few directors and producers do, but for the most part, they don't. And that's why Hollywood goes in that direction. Look at the aristocracy and the upper classes and elites and nobility in every society. They have always existed and they still exist to a certain extent today. What is aristocracy about? It's about conformity. All the trappings of the upper class, the fancy dinner parties and the galas and the special events and these sort of exclusive clubs and yachts and all this stuff. What is all this? This is all, why do you need this stuff? That's just part of the conformity of developing wealth and power in most societies. You got to kiss the ring. You got to conform. See, to have power and a lot of wealth, it is possible to acquire that independently, but that's much harder. Most people do it through some sort of mass conformity. They become a state propagandist. And then they get power and wealth that way, or fame that way. Or, they become some sort of industrialist. And then as an industrialist, you become a donor to the politicians. And then you maintain your power that way. But that entire system is all based around conformity. Where did that system come from? You didn't invent that system. Why are you participating in that system? Because you have some sort of ideas, conformist ideas about how you're supposed to, make it big in the world. Why do you care about making it big in the world? Again, because your culture programmed you with it. But don't think that conformity is just in the upper class. It's also in the lower classes. Look at the conformity in for example, clear example of it is African-American culture, rap, hip hop, expensive basketball shoes or whatever that are collectible and exclusive. Why? Why are you buying these overpriced, shitty shoes? art, entertainment, consumption like movies, video games, music, dance videos on TikTok, all of this is conformity. It's just apes aping apes. That's what it is. The popularity of brands, you got these Gucci's and I don't even know, what are the popular brands these days? The Louis Vuitton bags and this kind of shit. Why? Why is this? What are these luxury brands and goods? This is conformity. And I'm not saying you can't buy some of these goods. If you want to buy yourself a Rolex for some genuine reason that's authentic, fine. But I'm saying the reason you're buying your Rolex is because you don't actually have sovereignty of mind. You're actually an unconscious collective survival machine. And that's why you buy your Rolex. And that's painful to admit to yourself after you've spent $20,000 on a Rolex. That's all that was. See, and then you work night and day, burning the midnight oil, sacrificing time with your kids and with your friends and doing spiritual work and other sorts of valuable stuff you could be doing. And you're doing that, selling some sort of, opioids in a pharmaceutical industry. You're doing that just so that you can buy yourself a Rolex. So it's this giant incestuous cycle of conformist programming, right? Your culture programs you that you're supposed to be somebody in the world. You're supposed to drive a Bugatti and have a Rolex and have a trophy wife. And then so you have to work 10, 20 years to be, to manipulate and to scheme and to do bullshit sales and marketing in order to get the money to finance that kind of lifestyle. And then you're not happy about it. You're depressed at the end of the day. And you don't understand a goddamn thing. You don't understand the stuff that I'm talking about. You don't understand reality. You don't understand anything existential, anything metaphysical. Wine. This whole culture of people drinking wine. I was thinking about this the other day. Why do people drink wine? It's really crazy. If you think of what is wine? And I discovered this, what I did? I was drinking some cranberry juice and I just left it in a glass for a few days. I didn't drink the whole glass and I just left it. And then after a few days I came back and I thought I would just finish it off. And then I tasted it, I'm like, oh, this tastes gross. And it started to ferment. So it almost tasted like cranberry wine at that point. And it's like, oh, this is disgusting. And then it hit me like, oh, this is what wine is. I didn't understand what wine was until this happened. So this is kind of like an insight. And then it hit me like, oh, okay. Why do people drink wine? Today, the only reason people drink wine is because of conformity. But in the past, 2,000 years ago, the ancient Greeks, why did they drink wine? They drank wine because to them, they got the grape juice, but they didn't have refrigerators. So the grape juice would spoil after a week. And then, they had so little food, they had to just, there was no food to waste at that point. So you would consume anything you could that didn't kill you. So you would consume the wine. You would have preferred to consume fresh grape juice, but because you couldn't, just the limited technology, you drank the wine and the wine can preserve for a long time. So that's kind of beneficial. That's a technology of its own that you can preserve, drink that for that long. And the alcohol keeps bacteria away. So that's kind of good because, your water, if you just keep water or juice without proper fermentation, then it's gonna get contaminated with bacteria. It might kill you, make you sick. So that was in the ancient Greek times. It's really like the Enlightenment cat story, the Zen story I started with. It's like, it made perfect sense 2,000 years ago. Today we have refrigerators. Wine, if you think about it, objectively, wine tastes disgusting. Compared to grape juice tastes way better. You can go to the store you can get a gallon of fresh grape juice, organic grape juice, for $5 and put it in your refrigerator. And beautiful, it tastes great. No, instead, you have millionaires and billionaires spending $10,000 on a bottle of wine. Why are they doing that? Is it because the wine tastes good? Does it make your meal taste good? No, it doesn't. It's purely conformity. But they don't recognize that they're doing that. See, now, if you actually loved wine, no problem. I'm not saying you can't love wine. But what I'm telling you is that the reason you love your wine is actually bullshit that you tell yourself because you've been programmed and now you don't want to admit to yourself that really you've been spending thousands of dollars on wine all these years. And really, you were just a fool because you didn't realize, you didn't have enough intelligence and independence of thought just to realize that, oh, this is just a holdover from 2,000 years ago. People are just drinking this wine because they're idiots. You could just be drinking fresh grape juice and be happier, and it's cheaper and better and tastes better too. See, the conformity of wine, of fine wine, the whole fine wine subculture, is so severe that they have even convinced themselves that the wine that they're tasting, right, because they bullshit themselves so much. There's a whole industry built around this, that they actually convince themselves that the wine tastes better than grape juice. It's like, no, Leo, you don't understand. The wine is so sophisticated. You know, you could never get the same kind of sophistication from grape juice that you can get from wine. You know, Leo, I can tell a 1964 Bordeaux from a 1975, Merlot or whatever. Yeah, this whole game, you've invented this whole game for yourself as an elaborate distraction from doing what's really important in the world, which is existential work, existential contemplation into the nature of yourself, consciousness, and reality. That's what that is. It's a distraction, it's a game. And it's fine if you were playing that game consciously. Like, I'm playing a game wearing this costume. But that's not what you're doing. You're not conscious of it. You haven't transcended it. You're attached to it. And you're bullshitting. Your mind is bullshitting, coming up with bullshit to sustain that. That's the problem. There's also a whole subculture of cuisine, fine dining kind of stuff, where they do fancy foie gras and caviar and this kinds of stuff. A lot of that is also conformity. These celebrity chefs, this kind of Emeril Lagasse, Bobby Flay kind of stuff. Totally over, I went to some of these, I live in Las Vegas. So in Las Vegas, we have a lot of these sort of like fancy chefs, so celebrity chef restaurants. We have, I went to a Bobby Flay, I went to a Wolfgang Puck restaurant. And you know what I discovered is that it's overpriced and the food doesn't taste good. Why do people go to these restaurants? It's just conformity. Why does anyone go to a Wolfgang Puck restaurant? I mean, I'm sure like the original Wolfgang Puck restaurant or the original Bobby Flay restaurant, I'm sure it has some nice dishes to it. I'm not saying it's like awful food, but honestly, I can make better food at home for much less, or I can even go to look, frankly, even just a cheap, $20, just a $20 place in a strip mall is going to be better than some fancy dish that I get at a Wolfgang Puck restaurant. I mean, I'm sure there are some nice dishes, but the chances of you actually picking the right dish at the restaurant, especially given that it's all way overpriced, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it when you think about it. Think about business attire, the way people dressing in business suits, that whole culture. That scene from American Psycho, beautiful satire. That scene where Christian Bale is sitting with the business cards, and he's masturbating over the business cards. That's a beautiful scene. So this is what I'm talking about. That whole Wall Street, business executive kind of like milieu, the kind of country club milieu. That's how conformist is all that. Golf, also a very conformist kind of, You see, golf isn't just a sport. It's a whole subculture. Part of, business, making business deals and all that kind of stuff. Sports, how conformist are sports? People have their favorite sports teams. They even, in Brazil, they'll even do riots when they're sporting. Where else do they do riots? Brazil, probably in England, they do riots if their soccer team loses or whatever, they get upset over. I mean, just pure conformity. Martial arts, there's an enormous, Peter Ralston is one of the best examples of nonconformity. Like if you want a teacher and a set of teachings that's extremely nonconformist, Peter Ralston, amazing. Even though I have my disagreements with him, but just like an amazing role model of nonconformity. And, he's a martial artist. He's a world-class martial artist. And his whole thing is that he developed his own martial arts system because he did all the traditional karate and he did the jujitsu and the judo and he did all that stuff. And he found all of it to be too conformist. So he developed his own system based on true insight, the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. True insight and direct experience and consciousness and enlightenment and all that kind of stuff. He developed his own system. Which you can learn from him if you'd like. But, he talks about the conformity in martial arts. Like 99% of martial arts is just conformity. All of karate is conformity. even the masters who are teaching the karate or the judo or whatever, they are legitimate masters in that particular, little niche that they've mastered. But do they know the actual principles of martial arts the way that Peter Ralston does? No, they don't, because it was just conformity. Where did they get it from? They got it from some other master. And where did he get it from? Some other master. So it's the Enlightenment cat story all over again. Our education system is extremely conformist. Academia, schools, science, psychology, sociology, evolutionary psychology, materialism, theoretical physics, very conformist. Simulation theory, theories that reduce reality to computation. These are very popular and conformist. The sort of idea that we live in a matrix, this is all just conformist. Parroting scientific studies. People love to parrot scientific studies, like, oh, this scientific study, Leo, but this scientific study says that wine is good for your health. This is silly. This is not real science. This is silly. Demanding proof, this whole idea of like people demanding proof for stuff. Leo, prove that God exists. What is this? This is conformity. The kind of arguments that rationalists make, like people like Professor Dave, conformity. See, on the surface, it seems like Professor Dave is this guy who debunks mystics, and he debunks New Agers, and he debunks conspiracy theories, and he debunks, anti-science creationists and whatever else. Yes, he's a little bit above those people, but not by much. Because Professor Dave is doing conformity just a little bit higher quality conformity than the kind of conformity that a creationist does, or that a New Ager does. And he doesn't realize that. And then see, the question is, how do you get him to realize that? Because if he listened to me, he wouldn't realize it, because he would think that he's above what I'm saying. He would say like, no, Leo, what you're talking about is conformity. Science isn't conformity. Science isn't dogma. IQ tests. How about that for conformity? The valuing of IQ tests, thinking that an IQ test actually captures intelligence. I mean, it's laughable. Academic philosophy is all about conformity. Intellectual fads like postmodernism, quoting and parroting various philosophers. The way that all of academic philosophy is taught is extremely conformist. You're basically just taught to parrot other philosophers, not how to do philosophy on your own independently, the way that I teach. Any institution, collective, or organizational group is going to have its own groupthink and conformity that comes along with it. Why? Because every collective, what is it doing? It's surviving. And that's what you are. You're a survival machine. And you don't know that you're a survival machine because you're lost in the content. See, you think that drinking wine is not survival. You think that playing golf is not survival. You think that getting just the perfect business card to show to your clients, that's not survival. You think that buying your $100 million yacht and, upholstering it with the nicest furniture and, wallpaper and all that kind of stuff to impress your friends, you think that that's not survival. Professor Dave thinks that his whole YouTube channel is not survival. He doesn't understand that it's survival. You're just doing collective survival. When you're advertising NordVPN, what is that? Collective survival. See, but you don't register it as such. How about, as an example, the way that you use language, even spelling and grammar, jargon and concepts and distinctions and categories? This itself is conformist, right? Your mind is literally running on categories, concepts, and jargon and distinctions that you got as conformity. You need to literally take every single concept in your mind and word that you use in everyday language, and you need to trace it back to where did you get it from, and you need to question it and find whether it's really valid, the distinctions you're using, the concepts, the categories. People get anal and pedantic about proper spelling, proper grammar. What is proper spelling and proper grammar? It's just conformity. That's all that it is. If you're OCD about grammar and spelling, it's just conformity. That's literally all that you're doing. But you don't register it as such. And another example is conformity within criticism and judgment. All online, what you see is a criticism industrial complex. YouTubers are doing criticism and judgment for a living. And they are mostly just doing criticism and judgment as survival, not consciously. Here are a few more subtle examples of conformity. Rationalism. The website lesswrong.com, if you're familiar with that, and its founder, Eliezer Yudkowsky, he's a sort of a AI doomer type. By the way, the whole AI doom thing, pure conformity, less wrong. See, I'm going to have, coming very, very soon, I'm going to have my Deconstructing Rationalism series where we're going to go real deep on that. But the whole Less Wrong website and movement that Yudkowsky started, it masquerades as being this very like intelligent, epistemically grounded and sound, serious, truth-seeking, trying to be less wrong about your understanding of the world. But in the end, it's still all wrong. And it's all conformity still. It's just a higher degree of conformity. It's like a conformity with a little bit of a academic, epistemological, veneer to it, to pretty up a little bit, which just makes it a deeper self-deception. And these kind of people, they love to parrot cognitive biases. They read the list of cognitive biases, they memorize them. Oh, confirmation bias, that one. And then there's this kind of bias and that kind of bias and that kind of bias. And these people think that they understand what bias is. They don't. They parrot cognitive biases. They don't have a true understanding of bias the way that I teach. Go watch my episode, Understanding Bias, and also Self-Bias if you really want to understand bias. That's a real teaching on bias, not some cognitive bias bullshit list that you read on Wikipedia and memorize. Falsification and demystification within science. I'm going to have episodes on that coming soon. Pragmatism within science. Reductionism. These are conformities. I'm listing very subtle examples of conformity, the kind of stuff that you'll find in like advanced academic settings. STEM people. Human rights. Human rights is conformity. People do not understand what human rights is, where it comes from. Freedom, also the libertarian notion of freedom is conformity. I've talked about that in my episode about libertarianism, why libertarianism is nonsense, where we go deep into the notion of freedom and how libertarians don't understand what it is because they just have a conformist notion of freedom, not the real version of what freedom is. Veneration of the Constitution. Conservatives venerate the Constitution. The Second Amendment is this sacred thing. That whole phenomenon of venerating the Constitution, what the Supreme Court does, is all conformity. I already mentioned above, the legal system is extremely conformist. All right, now let's get some real deep insights here. Those were some examples. So look, I gave you this list of examples. That's a giant chunk. What I just explained is basically all of society in your entire life. So there's a lot. Sometimes these lists are kind of tedious, but the reason I need to give you these lists is because I'm trying to get a certain depth and a breadth to this understanding. You need to have a very big, deep understanding, broad understanding, giant scope. Breadth times depth is scope. A huge scope to your understanding of what conformity is. Because the word conformity itself has become so conformist that it's too shallow. So we're trying to deepen it, right? So that's why I'm giving you these lists so that it brings to mind all of this stuff and you can kind of see like, oh my God, this is such a gigantic force. It's not some little trivial thing. This is the entirety of my life here that he's talking about. Okay, now here's some really deep existential stuff. Ready for this? Look. Think of it this way. How conformist is God? Now I got to bring God into this. Look, I don't want to bring God into everything, but in the end I have to. And you might say, well, Leo, why do you have to bring God into this topic? Because it's all about God. All of my understanding comes from my understanding of God, right? There is nothing but God. Reality. When I say God, I'm talking about reality. So how conformist is God? Obviously, God's mind cannot be conformist. Why not? Because God is an absolutely sovereign mind. God is a mind so powerful that it can dream and imagine everything around itself. And it's singular. There's no other mind. It's not like God can sit around and say, well, should I invent a tree or a cat or a dog. Like, what should I do? Who do I ask? Oh, do I ask that guy over there to tell me what I should create? Is that how God works? Obviously not. So that's ultimately why conformity is wrong, is because ultimately you are God. You are reality. You are dreaming up and constructing all of reality around you, including the social domain and all of the social forces acting upon you that you're afraid of. Trying to fit in and being liked and loved and all this sorts of stuff. And the status that you want and the popularity and fame that you want and all this. You want to be somebody, right? Climb that corporate ladder and be somebody with your Rolex and your Bugatti and all this, and your trophy wife, and your white picket fence house and your kids. The reason you're doing all of that is fundamentally because you're hollow inside. You have no connection to your true self. You don't understand what reality is. You don't understand what God is. You don't know that you are God. And you don't understand that God is a sovereign mind. And so because of this, you're running around looking for satisfaction elsewhere in all this sorts of shallow materialistic nonsense, including stuff like science and making your successful science YouTube channel and whatever else, or making it on Wall Street, or building some super AGI. You don't understand the people building super AGI, the Silicon Valley, tech bro idiots. They don't understand that they are the AGI. You are super intelligent. You are God. God is infinite intelligence. And infinite intelligence cannot be achieved through conformity. You see, conformity itself is not intelligent because it's mechanically copying something else. If you had infinite intelligence, you wouldn't need to copy anyone. And in fact, you couldn't copy anyone because you'd be alone. Infinite intelligence only comes from infinite unity. You unify so deeply that you're all alone. As a mind, you're alone. You're in absolute solipsism. This is why no mainstream person understands God. This is why all of spirituality, conventional mainstream spirituality, none of it understands God. Why not? Because all of it is conformist. And God is infinite sovereignty of mind, infinite intelligence. God is a live, conscious, sovereign intelligence unbounded by human norms and limited ways of thought and survival concerns. No survival concerns, no self, no biases. No double standards. And not even sanity. Not even bounded by sanity. God is unbounded by sanity. That's how powerful of a mind God is. Sanity itself is too limited for God's mind. God has an infinite capacity to create anything you want with your own mind. You want a dog, you imagine a dog, and a dog physically materializes in front of you. That's what God is. How do you understand something like that? God is infinite creativity that can only be achieved by being a singular, unified, absolute, autonomous mind. Obviously, there's no room for conformity there because you don't care how you look, who perceives you, which way. There's nobody to perceive you. Only you perceive yourself in an autonomous, absolute mind. God is also love. God is also good. Love is infinite. How can love be bounded by conformity? See? You can't get to God through conformity because God is infinite love. But conformity bounds love. Notice how nonconformist love is demonized by all collectives and all cultures. You want examples? Homosexuality, interracial marriage, marrying other ethnic groups and tribes, loving your tribe's enemies, loving other species besides yourself. See, that's true love. True love is infinitely open. But all these traditionalist, Islamic people, Jewish people, Zionist people, whatever, they don't know what love is. They can't know what love is. Christians, they can't know what love is. Really. Because they're just mechanically following other people. That's not God mind. That's very small human animal mind. That's a mechanical zombie mind, not the intelligence of God. The intelligence of God allows you to see love in everything. Everything is love. To see evil as love. To see the most horrific shit you could imagine as love. That takes true intelligence and independence of mind. Humans are so close-minded that 50 years ago, they demonized homosexuality, and many of them still do. These fucking Christians who think they know God and they know Jesus and they know nothing. They can't even love homosexuality. These fucking Zionist Jews, they can't even love Palestinians. These fucking MAGA people, they can't even love progressives. This is the crux of the issue. This is why we're talking about conformity. It's not because I want you to be queer and hip and you know, some kind of fucking hipster who's just nonconformist for nonconformist's sake. No, what's at stake is infinite love. Your mind can't comprehend infinite love because you're so conformist. Because when I tell you that the fucking Holocaust is love, you can't compute that in your mind because your culture has taught you that the Holocaust is fucking evil. That's what's really at stake. Survival limits your mind's understanding of and ability to love. Your culture does not understand love. No culture does. No religion understands love. True love requires nonconformity and autonomy. There is a profound connection, of course, between conformity and corruption. You know how big I am on corruption. Corruption is a giant theme of all of my work. So here, we're building on that theme. Notice that most corruption is just conformity. Seeing and curing corruption requires courageous, independent thinking, live consciousness. Also, conformity, of course, always corrupts spirituality. Anytime spirituality is done in a conformist way, it's always corrupted. Why? Because God is a live, autonomous intelligence. And conformity is mechanical. It's unconscious. God is infinite consciousness. It's antithetical to unconscious, mechanical, animal behavior. It's antithetical to survival. God is being. God is not survival. God is being. Being is prior to survival, and being doesn't care about survival. Survival is warping your entire mind and your culture's mind. And then that culture, which is warped by collective survival, is then warping your mind when you're born into it. Conformity is also a corruption of morality. Have you wondered why all the fundamentalist and orthodox religious people who preach the most about being moral, these are the Christians, the evangelicals, the fundamentalists, Muslims, and Jews, and so forth, why these are they're always highly immoral people. Why is that? Because fundamentally, these people are incapable of morality. Why? Because you cannot reach true morality through conformity. What true morality means is being good, true goodness, goodness with a capital G. That's God. So really, true morality just means becoming God. But God is infinite consciousness. It's a live intelligence. It is not mechanical conformity. So no amount of mechanical action or parroting others or aping and monkeying others, imitating others, can lead you to good or to intelligence or to true morality, because these are all the same thing. Truth, love, God, intelligence, consciousness. This is all the same thing. And it requires self-understanding. It requires self-reflection. So when you're doing something out of conformity and you can't see that the reason you're doing it is out of conformity, for example, if you're a Muslim and you can't see that the only reason you are a Muslim is because you were programmed to be a Muslim as a child when you didn't know any better. If you can't see that, you cannot be a good person. That's impossible. It's metaphysically impossible. For you to be a good person, you need to have consciousness of God. For you to have consciousness of God, you need to have live intelligence, which is not mechanical and which is not contingent on anybody else. It's coming from within. It has to be autonomous. Becoming good requires autonomous mind. And unconscious collective survival, that's what humans call evil. Conformist morality is actually evil because it is unconscious and it is self-biased. Notice that all moral systems from past ages, from all of human history, has been deeply limited and conformist and biased, and which is why it generated so much evil. Understanding evil requires understanding conformity and groupthink. Why does evil keep happening over and over and over again in society? How do we get mankind to stop doing it? Well, you need to understand this topic, and you need to transcend and grow out of conformity. That's the only way that you can really stop evil. People mistakenly think that you stop evil by fighting evil. No, you stop evil by become conscious that you're God. And in order to do that, you need to stop being conformist. You need to actually be conscious and intelligent of what you are and what God is. Don't attribute to malice what can be explained by groupthink and conformity. That's a good quote of mine for you. Write that one down. What is terrorism but conformity and groupthink? Truly, think about it. And I'm not just talking about Muslim terrorism. I'm also talking about, for example, Zionist terrorism. The state of Israel was built on terrorism. Who were the original terrorists? Zionists. Actually, there was prior terrorists. The original terrorists were actually in Russia. The people that overthrew the Tsar, they were the original terrorists. They would bomb the Tsars in the early 20th century. But then, Zionists followed after that. And then after the Zionists came the Muslim terrorists. Again, look, if you're taking offense to any of this stuff, if you're taking anything that I'm saying personally, because look, I have offended literally every aspect of society and every culture in this episode. So people are bound to get offended one way or another, whether you're a Christian, a Muslim, or a Jew, or whatever. Look, if you're getting triggered by any of the things that I'm saying and you want to argue with me, again, none of this is personal, right? I have nothing against your particular culture or ethnic group. Like, I literally don't care. It's irrelevant, completely irrelevant. I'm just giving you specific examples of a much broader pattern. And the reason I'm giving you specific examples is because if I just give you the abstract pattern, you will fail to apply it exactly to those painful areas. See, if you're a Zionist and I just give you the general abstract pattern of conformity, you're going to see the conformity everywhere except in your Zionism. So when I point it out to you, it's like, oh, no, that hurts me. Yes, it hurts you. Of course it hurts you. Because that's the bullshit we're trying to extract from your mind so that your mind is opened. Or if you're a Christian, yes, it hurts you when I speak about Christianity in the disrespectful ways that I do. Yes, of course. That's the catch-22 here, is that I could tiptoe around and not offend anyone by not giving any concrete examples. Then it would just be pure abstractions. But then people would say, oh, Leo, you're just being so abstract and philosophical. It has no application and no practical purposes in reality. It's just philosophy. But then when I make it very concrete to the point where it pains you, well, now you cry and you pout and you write angry comments and you rationalize. The most important thing is not that you say something nasty to me. The most important thing is that you're not going to understand what I'm teaching you. That's the saddest part about it. See, you're gonna rationalize. You're gonna get very stubborn. You're gonna get defensive. The ego gets defensive. Have you noticed that all the most ugly and evil things that mankind has done was out of conformity? Nazism, the Holocaust, genocide, concentration camps, Japanese internment, the evils of communism all across the world. Racism, sexism, homophobia, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, exploitation, abuse, war crimes, war, torture, slavery, the Inquisition, religious violence, religious oppression, theocracy, the Crusades, tribalism and gang warfare, corporate crime and malfeasance and evils. the evils of capitalism, political corruption and evils there, financial bubbles, pollution. Where is all that coming from? It's all sourced from conformity. All of that is conformity. If the people in those positions, various positions, were actually doing live, conscious, intelligent, self-aware thinking independently of their collective, they would see that the things that they're participating in are wrong and antithetical to God and to truth and to love and to goodness. For example, if you were a plantation owner and you were thinking independently and you were really reflecting on your biases and you were following the teachings of Actualized.org, if they existed back then you would see that the slavery plantation system, that this is a corrupt system. And then you would drop it. Or if you were in the Inquisition, part of the Inquisition, you would see that. Or if you were part of the Crusades, you would see that. Or if you were at a Nazi concentration camp and you were, asked to do the dirty deeds, you would see that. Now, maybe you wouldn't be able to escape, but you would at least see that. Conformity creates mass stupidity. So really, this whole episode is just about helping you to not be stupid. Do you want to participate in the mass stupidity? Then carry on as you've been doing. So here's the key insight. You are just a survival zombie. You don't know why you do what you do. Mostly you follow a path of least resistance laid out for you by your culture. And this mostly leads to mediocre results. You'll survive, but it'll just be kind of mediocre survival. And maybe you won't even survive. It could also lead you to your death. Remember, this conformity is going to create a lot of war. It's going to create a lot of, strife and struggle, tribal conflict and so forth. You might get killed in that. But most likely you won't get killed. You'll survive. But it'll be a mediocre kind of existence. Or what you could do is you could wildly succeed. A few of you will wildly succeed. You'll become a millionaire and a billionaire. You'll become some sort of tech tycoon or some sort of, celebrity, Hollywood actor, or director, or whatever, musician or something like that. And you'll earn your millions and billions that way. But your life will still be fundamentally hollow, existentially shallow. You'll still be disconnected from God. And you'll still be corrupt. And you'll just contribute to the corruption through your conformity. But you will feel like you're being very successful because you're going to have your millions and you're going to have your fancy wine bar on your yacht and you're going to have some, hot girls there and all that. And so you're going to think that you're really succeeding. But you're going to be disconnected from God and fundamentally broken. Your mind has been hijacked by collective survival, and you don't even know it. Not only is there individual survival, there's collective survival. Of course, you're hijacked and completely lost in individual survival, but the collective survival, see, both these require a lot of work to become conscious of. Here's another key insight, is that autonomous mind is virtually impossible in third world societies because survival is too difficult in those societies without conformity. Notice that all animals are conformist. They just all do the same thing that they're all, programmed to do by their genetics and their instincts. They can't do anything else. They don't have, why can't an animal do anything else? Because an animal doesn't have the consciousness to truly question itself and to self-reflect and to act independently. An animal cannot know that it's God. An animal is just a survival machine. Now, a human is a little bit above an animal. A human is an animal. And in the further you go back into history, the more animal-like humans are, until literally humans just were hairy apes on the savannah, murdering each other with stones. But, even today, we're not that far off from that in certain parts of the world, like Ukraine, or in, the Middle East. So, here's the key to understanding human development. Development is not just some arbitrary thing. Human development, what is it really about at its core? At its core, it's that you were an animal. A few 100,000 years ago, you were an animal, no better than an animal. And then your mind developed a little bit more than an animal, and you got the ability to self-reflect and to question yourself and to question your own behaviors and actions. And you started to say, wait a minute, why am I eating that instead of that? Why am I having sex with that person and not that person? Why am I doing this habit and not that habit? Why am I, going to this place and living here and not living there? And so now you could start considering these alternatives, which an animal cannot do. But of course, back then, 100,000 years ago, there was so little technology and survival was so brutally difficult that you didn't have a lot of options. You didn't have a lot of options of who you could mate with, where you could travel, where you could live, what kind of clothes you could wear, what kind of music you could listen to. There was none of this, right? All you had was your little tribe of people, your family and a couple of other families near you, and you all had to survive together. And it was all life and death. And you didn't even have the luxury of a personal sense of self. Like, oh, I have my own ambitions. Like, I'm going to have my life purpose. And my life purpose is to be a mammoth hunter. It's like, no, you have no such options. Or it's like, my dream is to marry this perfect partner. It's like, no, your parents are going to set you up with whoever they want, whoever is convenient for them, whoever pays them the biggest dowry or whatever. So, I want to find true love. It's like, no, there's no luxury to find true love. You're just going to marry whoever your parents tell you. That's how it works. Now, today, because of all the technology we have, you can fly around the world and your parents can finance you as you venture around Europe on your vacations and you go to college and your college is all paid for. And if you live in one of these, European democracies or whatever, social democracies, and so you have all this freedom now, and you can listen to this music, and you can do this, and you can do that, but still fundamentally you're extremely conformist. So it's kind of an illusion of choice, and it's an illusion of freedom and nonconformity. Yeah, you can be a hippie, you can be a hipster, but in the end, it's all conformity. All those conformist habits that you had 500,000 years ago, before you were even fully human, those still persist in you today, and they still drive most of your mind today. And so development is very much enabled by technology. Don't underestimate the role of technology. In fact, I'm going to have a whole episode just talking about technology because it's so freaking important to development. But when we say that the Middle East or something like that is less developed, it has a lot to do with the technology, right? Because the reason, for example, in Afghanistan, they can't have feminism. It's not just because of all the patriarchy and the people, the Muslim men there are so brutal to the women. It's not just that. It's that what's the difference between America and Afghanistan? In America, we have technology. In America, you have you have condoms, you have contraception pills, you have cars, you have airplanes, you have free healthcare, you have free college in certain cases, right? More wealth. Your parents have more wealth. If it's not free from the government, it's free from your parents, and so forth. And this allows for sexual promiscuity and feminism in a way that cannot be it's just physically impossible in Afghanistan. And so therefore, the minds of the men and the women in Afghanistan reflect what their technology is allowing them to do. Because it makes no sense to be a mind in Afghanistan that is so advanced that you can think of all these crazy ideas, but you don't have any technology to actualize anything, right? The reason that my mind is so advanced is because I'm sitting on 500,000 years of human evolution of technological development, because I have books, I have the internet, because I can travel around the world, because my parents had money to send me to good schools, because I had 20 years of education where I didn't have to work. I didn't have to work in a salt mine as a child. We have child labor laws that prevented that kind of stuff. Plus, my parents were good enough that they didn't force me to go to work, at McDonald's or something like that. I was allowed to go to university and to study well and do all this kind of stuff, right? Because now we have the internet, I can make a living through the internet. I don't have to rely on some sort of collective. I don't have to be part of some church. If I was part of a church, I couldn't have these ideas, because if I had to be part of a church to make my living, otherwise, I would be excommunicated from the community. No one could give me a job. I wouldn't have a place to sleep or a way to pay my rent. Actualized.org couldn't exist. The only reason Actualized.org exists, the reason my mind is so advanced, is because I'm leveraging all the technology of the 21st century. So it's not just because I'm smart, or just because I'm so unconventional or contrarian or whatever. That's part of it, but a lot of it is technology. And many in the world don't have this technology. Go to rural Africa, rural China. They don't have this kind of technology. And the technology is not just computers and gadgets. The technology is also language, writing, literacy, mathematics, scientific method, microscopes, telescopes, textbooks, printing presses, machinery, advanced machinery, CPU chips and satellite technology, cell phone technology, water purification technology, food sanitization, pasteurization technology, all this kind of stuff, right? If you don't have all of that, then you can't have a very developed mind. I mean, you can, but it's going to be exceedingly more likely. I mean, less likely that you will. It gets harder and harder and harder the more backwards in history you go, which is why mankind becomes more barbaric. The more you go back in history, the more barbaric mankind is. Have you noticed this? Until if you get back to 1 million years, you're just an ape with, throwing stones and shit at each other. It took mankind hundreds of thousands of years of evolution to grow out of tribal conformist life. This is only possible because we have this technology and the social infrastructure. This also includes governmental infrastructure, police, firefighters, democracy, the Constitution, the court system, bureaucracy, military, CIA, NSA, blah, 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 blah. And now it's easy enough in a Western democracy, so to speak, to operate relatively individualistically. Now that one can operate more individualistically, now the mind can become more individualistic, because literally that umbilical cord that I said at the beginning of this episode, that umbilical cord, now it can stretch further and further away, right? You're not as attached to living it. Like, think about how survival worked in the past. Imagine you were living in ancient Athens. You're living in a little city. That city is your whole life. If you leave that city, there's no police force. There's nobody to protect you. There's no military. Anybody, just some dude can come by and just murder you for your clothes. And your city can get sacked. And once your city is sacked, everybody in the city gets killed or enslaved and genocided. So when you're living in that city, you are that city, right? The survival pressure on you is so immense that you can't even think independently, because when you start having independent thoughts, you can no longer function as a team member of that city, and everybody in the city dies. So you're forced to be deeply collectivist, to the point where it's not just your behaviors, it's your entire psyche, your entire ego. That's why we're calling this stages of ego development, right? In ancient Athens, there's literally not even a reason to think independently, because if you do, it's just going to be a waste of energy, because it's just going to get you killed. Your own people will kill you. That's why they kill Socrates. He was too independent of a thinker, right? And it threatened their survival. But as mankind develops technology and various kinds of infrastructure, civil, social, political infrastructure, life and survival becomes easier and easier. As it becomes more easier, you can liberalize. You don't have to be so conservative and uptight. You can liberalize. You don't need the old traditions anymore. You have more options and you have more abundance. Today, we have way more abundance than we had 2,000 years ago. Even the poorest person today can easily afford a TV and internet and cell phone and food and other things like that. And so now that there's just more abundance on the whole planet, there's just so much more abundance. You have, even if you don't own a house, you can go sleep under a public bridge, which didn't exist 2,000 years ago. And so now you can afford to be a little bit more individualistic with your mind. And it actually makes sense because you can actually survive that way, because in the past, you could be individualistic in the past, but it would just get you killed real quick. And after all, you're just a survival machine. So you're just going to do the path of least resistance that will enable you to survive. Isn't that true? Isn't that what you're doing every day? Why is conformity difficult and rare to break free of? Because survival has you by the balls. Even in America, even in 21st century America, how will you make your money if you're nonconformist? Your boss, your business, your parents, they all expect you to conform to their norms, to their morality, to their ideas. Your boss has certain norms for the industry that you need to conform to. You need to wear a certain suit if you work in a certain kind of job, or they'll fire your boss will fire you. How are you going to pay your rent? You're working in a business, maybe you are, you say, well, I'm going to be the boss. Well, even if you are the boss, you're going to have clients that expect you as the boss to dress a certain way, show up at a certain time, do things a certain way, please them a certain way. Your parents will expect certain things from you. Your friends will expect certain things from you. The politicians, if you want to climb the social hierarchy and gain power and status and wealth, well, then you're going to have to please all sorts of people. You're going to have to kiss all sorts of rings for that to work. If you want your trophy wife, you're going to have to please her in certain ways and conform to her standards. Otherwise, she's going to leave you for somebody else who will conform to her standards, because she's not a free thinker like you are. And you're not going to get her to change her mind because she's been so brainwashed. Notice how you conform to make money. That's a very specific point, right? Because see, usually when people talk about conformity, they talk about it in such a superficial way. It's like, oh, well, you just like, stop being so conformist, man. It's like, no. But the way you earn money is really where the conformity is. That's the real rub of the issue. Autonomy of mind really requires financial autonomy, which is, why do you think I'm able to do this radical work that I do? It's only because I have financial autonomy, which I developed first. And how did I develop it? Was it by accident? No, deliberately, because I knew I needed it to have the autonomy to do this creative work that I do. See? But even if you're running your own business, you're still going to have to conform to the standards of your industry and business culture in general. Good luck trying to run, some sort of Silicon Valley tech company that's publicly listed on the stock exchange, and being very nonconformist. Nope, you can't do that. You got to abide by all sorts of laws and regulations and investors and then this and that and customers and these people. Otherwise, they'll just fire you. The board will fire you. They'll do a coup and fire you. See? Imagine that you're the CEO of a big Fortune 500 company like, let's say, Disney, right? And you get the idea that, hey, I don't want to run Disney anymore for maximizing profit. I want to run Disney for creating healthy educational content for children, teaching them about genuine spirituality and truth-seeking and epistemology and like really, good stuff, healthy eating, this kind of stuff, right? You would think like, oh, okay, this is a good person. See, this is like we're talking about goodness, right? So this is like real morality. It's like, oh, okay, this is like you're actually trying to do something good for children and for society. What's going to happen? What's going to happen is the board at Disney is going to fire you very quickly. Why? Because they're there to make money. They don't care about the health of the children or what's good for society or epistemology or truth, none of that shit. Spiritual God, they don't care about any of that. They just want their money. And this content that you're going to be creating, let's say Disney shifts its focus away from, kids entertainment, the kind of like mainstream stuff that it does, and Star Wars and, whatever else they do, Marvel movies. They switch away to more educational kind of content for kids, spiritual content. Well, they're going to lose 90% of their money. Because what do kids want? Do kids want to sit and listen to a long lecture about epistemology? No, kids want to watch a stupid fucking, Star Wars movie with a Jar Jar Binks in it, doing stupid things. And so you're going to be fired. And so see, what happens is that there can't even be goodness. Goodness cannot actually happen, because when you start to use your mind and you start to think about like, okay, how do we make Disney the best it can be to help children in society in the world? You can do that, but nobody else is going to support you because you're part of a collective. And the collective is just doing unconscious survival. They don't care about what's good. Why? Because they can't even see what's good. They don't have the consciousness or the autonomy of intelligence to know what's good. To them, what's good is making money. Why? Because that's what everybody's doing. To them, what's good is a trophy wife. To them, what's good is having a $100,000 golf club membership and having a Bugatti and having a $10,000 bottles of wine and going to a gala and kissing the rings of politicians and then getting some kickbacks and getting some favors done. This is what's good for them. And of course, that is the definition of corruption. That is what evil is. And all of that is just unconscious survival. Are they deliberately doing evil? No, they're just doing unconscious survival because they're just animals. They're just survival machines. Unconscious survival, that's what an animal is. And this pressure, where it almost feels futile to think independently in one of these large collectives, because even if you do think really morally and independently in a collective, in a government, in the military, in the CIA, all they're going to do is you're just going to create problems for yourself. You're going to create enemies. They're going to kick you out, and in the worst case scenario, they'll imprison you or they'll kill you. In a more developed part of the world, they'll just kick you out and take all your money. And in a less developed part of the world, like Afghanistan or Saudi Arabia, they'll just cut your head off. And before they do that, they'll torture you. First, they'll lock you up, then they'll torture you, and then they'll behead you, and then they'll also torture your family too. This is how it really works. And this is why the Middle East is less developed, because at least in America, they won't torture your family if you do something wrong. In the Middle East, they definitely will. If you don't believe me, I have books. I literally read books. I read torture books from the Middle East. Books, page after page of the tortures that they do in the Middle East. I can name them to you, but it would be so awful, this video would probably be age restricted. How's that for postmodernism? You think as others think because it's easier to survive that way. You don't yet understand the seriousness of what I mean by survival. By the way, go watch my episodes on survival called Understanding Survival Part 1, Part 2, and also another third one called How Survival Shapes Who You Are. Those are fundamental. But even if you watch those, you still don't understand what I mean by survival. You don't understand how serious this is, right? You're still thinking of conformity as this like superficial, like, oh, take it or leave it. I want to just like, I can have my beliefs be whichever way. No, the reality is that you are so unconscious that you're not even capable of changing your own beliefs. Like as a Christian, I can tell you to change your beliefs, but you're not going to do it because you're so unconscious. You can't help yourself. You're an automaton. You're not a sovereign consciousness. You're not a sovereign mind. That's why you're so disconnected from God. That's why when I tell you that you're God, you're in disbelief because you're so far from God. You're literally an animal. And so as the animal that you are, as the zombie, the survival zombie that you are, you're right, you're not God. You're just a survival zombie. God is for those who have achieved autonomy of mind. Conformity in accepting the status quo as normal and good. You see this over and over and over again throughout history, whether it's with colonial slavery or with the Inquisition or the religious wars or stuff like that. The status quo is always accepted as normal and good. That's conformity. Here's a great quote I want to read to you, powerful one from Peter Joseph. He says, quote, "People tend to not criticize the social order because they are bound within it. We are running a thought program which has been installed on our hardware, which inherently controls our frame of reference. It's like they're in a game, and the idea of questioning the integrity of the game itself rarely occurs. The trick is to condition people so thoroughly into the established value system that any thought of an alternative is inherently ruled out without critical examination. End quote. And by the way, this conformity is exploited by elites and the rich and powerful and famous to gain money, power, sex, fame, status, and luxury. So it's even worse than I described. It's not just that the conformity is there, it's that the conformity is literally the grist for the mill to create more survival and more conformity. Businesses, marketers, con artists, governments, elites, corrupt people, psychopaths, tyrants, religions, narcissists, and devils exploit this conformity for their own personal gain. Because the conformity serves them. You know, the conformity of MAGA serves Trump. The conformity on Wall Street serves certain Wall Street investors. The conformity of Silicon Valley serves certain Silicon Valley investors. The conformity of people on TikTok and Instagram and X and Twitter and YouTube, this serves the owners of the platform. They are milking you. They are milking the conformity. What is Facebook? It's a conformity milking mechanism. What is Fox News? They make billions of dollars milking conformity, selling conformity. They're a propaganda machine for a conservative mind virus. That's literally their business model. They couldn't exist otherwise. What does Disney do? It serves conformity. Various kinds of mass cultural entertainment, needs that the majority of people have. Not what's good for them. They deliberately serve what's bad for you. Because that gets them more money. That gets you buying more. Because see, what's good for you, what's actually healthy for you, the stuff that I teach, this is the stuff that doesn't feel so pleasant. This is disturbing. It's difficult. It's labor. It causes existential crisis, but it is healthy. Curing you of your evil is healthy, but it's painful for you, right? We're literally, what are we doing with Actualized.org? We are exorcising the devil out of you with every video, one video at a time. And what do most companies, why is what I teach so different from what most corporations do? Most corporations are actually feeding the devil in you, making him fatter. Whether it's Disney or McDonald's or Instagram. Instagram is feeding the devil in you for profit. And you are such an unconscious zombie that it can feed, that Instagram and or Facebook or YouTube can just feed, or TikTok is a better example, can just feed the reptile brain stem in you exactly what it wants. See? And that keeps you from realizing that you're God. See? And that keeps you empty inside and suffering and depressed and miserable. And so therefore you're looking for solutions. So you go and you double down and you ask for more TikTok. And you ask for more Instagram, and you ask for more McDonald's, and you ask for more, crypto nonsense, thinking that will help you. You ask for a Bugatti, thinking that's going to help you. The only thing that's going to help you is to realize that you're God. You are God. Got to bring my prop in here. Paid good money for this. Okay. So it's important to understand that the rich and powerful are still themselves fully conformist. This is not a elitist conspiracy theory. The rich and powerful are all doing this unconsciously. They're all just survival zombies themselves. And the intellectuals and scientists and academics, they're also all conformist. They're also part of this. They're not above this. Even the philosophers. See, I'm talking about a corruption that's so deep that it permeates every single aspect of society. academia, science, industry, military, government, every single business, every corporation, every social media platform, YouTube, Facebook, every algorithm. Do you see how ingenious this is? This is the devil's genius. This is pure devilry that I'm describing here. Of course, in a poetic sense, I use the term devilry. It's just, the deception of it is just pure genius, pure genius. To be able to see through this illusion and break out of it into autonomous God consciousness. This is, wow. That's what life is about. See, the conformity of your job is a huge, subtle topic. People do not appreciate how much their career makes them conformist. Why is it such a huge factor? Because career is all about survival. People think their career is about something else. No, career is all about survival. Your career hides and obscures conformity because it just seems like it's part of the job. And it's like, well, my job can't be done any other way. This is just how business is done. You know, I have to wear my suit, and I have to wear my briefcase, and I have to have my little fancy business card, and I have to say hello, and I have to put on a fake smile, and I have to, I have to do this, and I have to fire that person if they do this thing, and I have to hire that person if they say this, and I have to follow these regulations, and I have to please the customer, and I have to maximize profit. This whole thing can only be about maximizing profit. It can't be about goodness. It can't be about truth. It can't be about epistemology. It can't be about philosophy. It can't be about God. None of that stuff. It has to be about maximizing profit. It has to be about shareholder value. See, this is corruption. This is the heart of corruption. So really, we're talking about changing your career. How many careers are actually just devilry for profit, honestly? Now let's get a little bit into the politics aspect of this. Nearly all political beliefs, positions, and views are just conformity. There is no truly autonomous political thinking happening on social media. Right-wing and left-wing both suffer from intense conformity, but conservatives are more conformist than liberals. Now here, if you're conservative, you're going to disagree with me. You're going to say, "What, Leo, how can you say that? I mean, look at those libtards and those, those social justice warriors and those wokes. Wokeness is so conformist." Yeah, you're right. That is very conformist. However, now, be very honest and unbiased. Look at your own side. If you're a conservative, look at the conformity on your own side. Look at how conformist MAGA is. Look at how conformist Nazis are. Look at how conformist racists are. Look at how conformist anti-immigrants are. Look at how conformist abortions are. Look at how anti-abortion people are. Look at how conformist Christian evangelicals are. Mormons are. Conservative Muslims. Terrorists. Look at how conservative they are. Look at how conformist they are. Right? If you have any intellectual integrity whatsoever, which you probably don't as a conservative, but if you do, and you're one of the few, rare conservatives, they do exist, then you have to admit that all of conservatism is about insane levels of conformity. All of it. There's just no escaping this. It doesn't matter what flavor of conservative you are, libertarian or Christian or, Christian nationalist, whatever. It doesn't matter what country you're part of. It doesn't matter if you're secular or religious. It makes no difference. You are doing... See, the conservative doesn't understand what he's doing. You do understand this as a conservative? What are you doing? You're doing unconscious collective survival. That's what you're doing. You're defending traditions. That's what a tradition is. See, you have to actually see it that way. It's like, yeah, Leo, okay, and then you just kind of move on and you just keep sticking with your tradition. No, that means you didn't get it. You didn't get what your tradition is and why you defend it. Fascism and communists are both conformist abominations. So is neoliberalism, so is centrism, so is techno-optimism, so is libertarianism. Notice that every nation in the world is plagued by conformist cultural forces and nationalism and tribalism, sorry. Look at the corruption of democracy in America through corporate lobbying. What is this? This is conformist. This is a conformist affair. The corruption of American democracy through Endless money in politics. This is conformist. And conformity and groupthink devolve into extremism. But it's even worse than you think, because you might say, well, then centrism is the answer, right? No, because centrism is also conformist. So where do you go? It's conformity everywhere. It's like there's no alternative. After more than a decade of watching intensely studying politics, I finally achieved a level of political mental autonomy. Just like I did in my spiritual pursuits, I achieved mental autonomy there. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute coming up here. But also, I achieved it within politics. I see all the conformity on the right, and I see it all on the left as well. Even though I am part of the left, in temperament and all that, and in most of my positions, but like I see all the conformity of socialists, Marxists, progressives. And this allows me to truly be intelligent about politics. See, you can only be truly intelligent about politics when you have transcended all of that conformity. Now you can really think point by point without any ideology, on a case-by-case basis, really without bias, without attachment, without having a tribe, without having to defend something. You can really think about the nature of politics and society and how to structure it properly. And that's why, if you like my political content, that's why my political content is so good, it's so high quality, because you notice that it's clearly above all that stuff, right? I'm not doing the partisan tier one politicking that almost everybody else is doing on YouTube. This allows, so see, now you see the power. This allows me to have genuine, profound insights into the nature of politics and government that could not be had otherwise, because I would be too lost defending some position or having some kind of bias. Conformity affects your values, your meaning system, motivations, and ideals. The things you find most meaningful to pursue are infected and corrupted by conformity. You are a monkey copying other monkeys. Money, sex, family, fame, success, religion, media, etc. What would you even do and who would you even be if you weren't conforming to all that? Your career, your education, how much of that has just been conformity? What major you chose, what career you went, why did you choose your career path? Really? See, this now leads us to the topic of discovering who you really are. Your life really is a process of self-discovery on many levels. First, it just begins discovering your own personality, your own values, what you find meaningful, your own moral system, right? Most people have just conformist morality. They think murder is wrong just because someone told them that it's wrong. They haven't actually thought through, is murder actually wrong? Maybe it's not. They haven't thought it through. They don't understand. And if it is, why is it? Can you articulate it? Like, existentially, why is murder wrong existentially? What's wrong with that? That's not so easy to answer. Most people just have a pat answer that they got from some book. Discovering who you are, your values, your moral system, which, by the way, my life purpose course helps a lot with, so see that if you're interested in more. We get very granular there to help you figure out your values. But to discover who you are, this takes a long time. It really takes until you're 40 years old. Now, I turned 40 this year, and I finally now feel like I understand who I am. And I don't mean in a God sense. I mean just in a personality sense. Like, I know my personality. I know what I'm willing to put up with and what I'm not willing to put up with. I know my values. I know my priorities. I know what I want out of relationships. I know what I want out of business, out of art, out of career, out of entertainment. Like, it feels so good to like finally know myself. And actually, I think this is an aspect of development that I think a lot of these neo-Advaita teachers who just teach you, self-inquiry, they don't help you to know yourself as a personality. Because yeah, you're God, but you're not just God, you're also the personality that you are. So just to understand your personality takes 40 years. And that's with a lot of work. That's not just me, coasting. Well, I wasn't working all those 40 years, but at least half of those At least 20 years I was working hard at it. And that to discover who you really are requires transcending conformity, because your inner personality, we might say, this is not cultural. It's genetic. Who you really are as a personality is genetic. It's not cultural. And so you can't discover it by reading a book, or by somebody telling you, or by imitating somebody. Right? And discovering who you are, this is also a very subtle and has many layers to it to discover who you are. For example, you might discover that you're an artist. At heart, you're an artist. But then what kind of art do you want to make? And what do you want to say with your art? To discover that, that's going to take you 10 years of work, of deep introspective work. And you can't just do that by imitating other artists. You see, you can learn artistic technique by imitation, but you can't learn like what you want to say, what you want to contribute, what you want to create as an artist. Now, of course, you can get inspired and so forth. So, of course, you need inspiration, and imitation as an artist is all good. It's fine to get started. But see, life is all about self-discovery. And the more you discover yourself, the better your life is going to be, the more grounded you're going to be, the more secure you're going to be, the less depressed you're going to be, the more meaning you're going to have in your life, the more satisfying your life is going to be. And this is all going to be true even if you don't have your awakenings and enlightenments. Just for normal material life. Why are you doing everything that you're doing? Do it on audit of your values and motivations to weed out conformist influences. For example, you're pursuing success and fame just because you see others doing it, or because your dad did it, or because some role model of yours did it. For example, you have your favorite sports team, and it never occurred to you that the reason you like that sports team is just because of conformity. Why do you even need to have a favorite sports? Why do you even watch sports at all? Probably for conformist reasons. Why are you meditating? Maybe you're meditating because I told you to meditate, and you're just doing it because I meditate, and you're just monkeying me. And then that's conformity. Now, does that mean that you can't meditate genuinely? Of course you can. You can meditate and not have it be a conformist thing. But you'd be surprised how many people just meditate out of conformity. Because see, you could spend 5 years meditating and not getting any real spiritual growth out of it just because you're going through the motions. You're doing it mechanically, but you're not realizing that it's not working for you. Why is it not working? Well, maybe because your genetics is wrong and you have the wrong genetics, and maybe you don't need meditation. Maybe you need yoga. Maybe you need psychedelics. Maybe you need art, something else. Maybe you need to travel. See? No one can tell you who you are but you. Do you get that? That, of course, is true of your personality, but then it goes deeper into, ultimately God realization, because nobody can tell you that you're God but you. Nobody can tell you that you're a sovereign mind but you. That's a you realization. Why are you buying whatever you're buying? In Saudi Arabia, they like to buy camels, collect rare camels, and breed them. Why? Why do they do that in Saudi Arabia? Why don't they do that in America or in Japan? Because in Saudi Arabia, they needed camels to survive. And they still, to this day, they nowadays in Saudi Arabia, they drive Rolls Royces and Bugattis, but the guy has 5 Bugattis, but he still collects camels. He spends more on a fucking camel than on a Bugatti. Why? Because he doesn't even understand why. He's just doing it. It's just tradition. Does he need the camel? No. He drinks the camel's milk. Is the camel's milk tastier than a cow's milk? No, but he still drinks it. Why? He can afford cow's milk, but he drinks the camel's milk. Why? Because it's his tradition. And he doesn't recognize it because he's just a survival zombie. He's a very rich oil tycoon, billionaire survival zombie with 10 Bugattis and 100 camels that are worth more than probably your entire life savings. How are you doing the same thing? See, it's easy to make fun of some guy in Saudi Arabia. How are you doing the same thing? If you're doing business in some kind of industry, I want you to be very mindful of the norms of the industry that you follow and why you follow them. And start questioning those norms. Look at how much of what you do is conformity. Your political beliefs, audit that. How you dress, audit that. The music you listen to, audit that. How you use language, this is a very important point. Audit how you use language, grammar, spelling, idioms, cliches, and memes. Even the emojis that you use in your text messages, the little abbreviations that you use, the little LOL, ha ha ha, this guy, audit that. How much of that is conformist? Audit even the emotions you have, right? Like if you're working at Starbucks as a cashier, barista, whatever, and somebody comes to you, orders something, and then you put on a smile and you act a certain way, right? You're being inauthentic, but you need to be that way to get his attention, to maybe get a tip or whatever, or because your manager, your boss needs you to act that way, to sell him something. Maybe you're, car salesman, you got to do that kind of thing. And then you're using certain language, which isn't really authentic to you. You have to audit all of that and start to change. This is real development work right here. This is the good stuff right here. Audit the tropes and concepts you think in. You think in categories and concepts. Distinctions that you make in your mind. Are you using the right distinctions and categories? What's an example of a category? For example, leftist, liberal, conservative, fascist. These are examples of categories. Masculine, feminine categories. Science, pseudoscience categories. Many, many more of those. Audit all of those. Where do those come from? Why do you use the ones you use? See, every category shapes how your mind works. That will limit you if you're using only certain categories. Certain categories are more limited than other ones. Category like good and evil. Audit the mental models that you use. Where did you get your mental models? Models like spiral dynamics as an example, but many other kinds of models. Those create limits in your mind and prevent your mind from being fully autonomous. Audit your fears and problems. A lot of your fears and just problems in life can just be coming from conformity, from various conformist expectations and goals that you place upon yourself. Audit your criticisms and judgments, your view of history and historical narratives, who you respect and admire, your business ideas. A lot of your business ideas are extremely conformist. The city and country you live in, why do you live there? Why don't you live somewhere else? Your spiritual ideas and practices, of course. Your understanding and use of pop psychology, evolutionary psychology, various kinds of bro science, gym rat science. Your morality, that's a big one. How you learn, what methods do you use to learn? Who taught you how to learn? Did anybody ever teach you? What you consider authoritative sources, audit that. Who and what you trust and distrust. If you work in the police, military, if you're a judge, a lawyer, an accountant, a doctor, one of these kind of professionals, as they say, audit, there's so much conformity going on there. If you're one of these bureaucrats. Audit even your opinions. Where do your opinions come from? I bet you most of your opinions are not your own. You got it from some YouTuber or some TikTok guy or whatever. Your style and your taste. The kind of art you do and how you do it. Your art will only improve the more you transcend conformity. Be mindful of the philosophers that you parrot. The point of this episode is not to convey a shallow and obvious sense of the dangers of conformity, but to point out the subtle and sophisticated ways in which your life and mind are dominated by conformity. Think of a time in your life when you jumped on some bandwagon fad, some trend, which now years later looks foolish. You've done that, right? Well, now consider that's still happening, but at a more deep and more subtle level. I want you to notice conformity at a much deeper level, a micro level than just the obvious stuff. For example, notice the font that you use to write your documents. Why are you using that font? Notice the food that you eat because of conformity. Notice that your entire religion is conformity. Notice the language that you use is conformity. Notice how you talk to your friends is conformity. Notice that your scientific explanations of reality are conformity. Notice that You make skeptical arguments, and how you apply skepticism is conformist. Your ideas of right and wrong. So audit all your behaviors, beliefs, and your lifestyle with this following question. Why am I really doing this? Am I doing this just because others are doing it? Why are you praying? Why are you going to church? Why are you going to university? Why are you doing that kind of specific business that you do? Why are you in this career? Why are you making this kind of art? Why do you admire this person here? And very importantly, I want you to start to notice how you think in cliches. Trace where your ideas come from. Notice how much you're just repeating ideas you heard elsewhere, whether it's Marxism or some libertarian notion of freedom or some notion of human rights or, climate catastrophism or whatever, or some gender ideology. Notice that you didn't generate these ideas. And then in your mind, a possibility will open up of, okay, well then how do I generate some of my own ideas? And then start generating those and actually see the difference between generating your own ideas and just repeating what others said. And you might have this epiphany of like, oh my God, I've never had an autonomous thought in my whole life. It's all just been rehashing of stuff that's, been around me in my environment from other people. And especially be wary of this if you're a very extroverted social person. You're always talking to a lot of people, socializing. Well, then what's happening is that you're just getting bombarded by ideas from other people, and you're not giving yourself enough time to think deeply about them, reflect deeply upon them. And then you're just accepting stuff just by talking. That's like what a lot of podcasters fall into this trap. Podcasters, they're interviewing people every day and they're just interviewing more and more people. And they're just like, whatever they're just bombarded with ideas. And it's like, oh, that idea sounds cool. And this one sounds cool. Okay. And then I'll just believe this weekend, that weekend, this sort of podcaster head. Groupthink is actually a concept coined by William White and psychologist Irving James. And here's a little bit of what they wrote about this. Symptoms indicative of groupthink include 1. Overestimation of the group, its power and morality. 2. Illusions of invulnerability, creating excessive optimism and encouraging risk-taking. 3. Unquestioned belief in the morality of the group, causing members to ignore the consequences of their actions. 4. Closed-mindedness, rationalizing away warnings that challenge the group's assumptions. That's the paradigm lock I was talking about. Next is stereotyping those who are opposed to the group as weak, evil, biased, spiteful, impotent, or stupid. Next is pressures towards uniformity. Next is self-censorship of ideas that deviate from the apparent group consensus. Next is illusions of unanimity among group members. Silence is viewed as agreement. And then also, next is direct pressure to conform placed on any member who questions the group, couched in terms of disloyalty. So you're being disloyal, you're being a traitor if you think differently. And then the last point is what they call mind guards, self-appointed members who shield the group from dissenting information. Does that ring any bells of any groups that you're a part of? Yeah, groupthink. Groupthink results in irrational and dehumanizing actions directed towards outgroups. Any organizations that you are a part of will have in-group in it. I'm sorry, not in-group, but groupthink in it. And combating that groupthink will be crucial. Otherwise, you should expect bad things to happen if you don't get a handle on that groupthink. The groupthink will bite you in the ass. For example, like imagine you become the president of the United States tomorrow, and then you're in the White House, and you have a team of people, advisors and political consultants and all this, donors, all there, vying for your attention, giving you all sorts of ideas about what we should do today, what war we should start, what program we should fund or defund, whatever. Notice that your job, if you want to be a really good president, your job in that role is going to be to combat all the groupthink. That's going to be like your number one job. Because what's going to happen is that all your military advisors will gather together, and then they'll all start telling you, like, Russia is invading Ukraine. We got to start bombing Russia and doing this and preparing. And then the CIA will come in there and they'll say, yeah, we got to prepare this thing here. Here's an assassination plan, and here's this plan, and here's that plan. And then you're going to be like buying into that whole dynamic. And they're not going to like it when you're going to start to ask, questioning their assumptions. Like, well, maybe Russia has validity in what they're doing. See, that's where you're starting to question some assumptions there of the deep state. And I'm not saying this is right or wrong. This is just a random example. Or maybe the CIA comes to you with a plan and then say, oh, there's terrorists doing this. And then maybe you have to question, like, wait a minute, are those people really terrorists? And see, the CIA is not going to like you asking that question because they already believe they're terrorists. And so a bad president is going to feed into that groupthink. And that's exactly what happened with the Bush administration. See, because Bush was a conformist fool, Christian conformist fool, stage blue. He wasn't qualified for the job. He didn't have the intelligence necessary to do that job. And so what he did is he just fed into the groupthink. And so you got Rumsfeld, and you got Dick Cheney, and you got Colin Powell, and you got Condoleezza Rice, and you got a bunch of other people, Wolfowitz and Pearl and all these people, neocons, and then they ginned up this Iraq war, this war on terrorism, NSA spying, tapping, all this sorts of stuff, right? Because see, if you were really intelligent in that role, after 9/11, you would have realized that, wait a minute, this is an opportunity for a lot of unconscious groupthink and conformity to spiral out of control. So as the president, if you're a good president, what you would say is that, look, guys, we were attacked. I understand that we're suffering and grieving all this, but we have to be extremely careful right now not to overreact, not to go into some kind of groupthink or some sort of mass hysteria or fantasies about terrorism or about Islam or about any kind of stuff. Because if we overreact, we can cost ourselves trillions of dollars, start unnecessary wars, and actually set back the cause of the safety from terrorists. Because we could actually create more terrorists by acting in the wrong ways than by acting very smartly and strategically and in a contained and precise way. So even though we're grieving over 9/11, we have to be extremely careful about this groupthink stuff. And so my job as the president is to be very careful to guide you folks through this process so that we don't end up shooting ourselves in the foot, because no terrorists can hurt us as much as we can hurt ourselves. See, this is what an intelligent president would do. A stupid president would use this opportunity to build on the groupthink and then use this to enrich himself, enrich his friends through corruption, enrich the military-industrial complex, start some unnecessary war for some stupid moral cause of good and evil. He doesn't even understand what morality is, under some stupid Christian pretenses. See, this is what a stupid president would do. That's George W. Bush. Groupthink is the price you pay for being part of any organization. Every organization will have its own specific kind of groupthink, even if it's just 10 people, even if it's just a sports team, soccer team, NBA team, small startup in Silicon Valley. Maybe you have 10 friends in a garage starting some new social media company. Well, there's going to be groupthink there of a certain sort. And you want to be careful about that. And you want to be mindful that groupthink is going to be designed for what? For the survival of the organization. Remember, everything your mind is doing, pretty much, until you reach sovereignty of mind, is just unconscious survival. And so it is for the organization. And the organization is never going to reach, an organization I don't think can reach autonomous mind or God consciousness. So that's an individual. Only an individual can reach God consciousness. See, this is the thing that when people try to do this kind of false equivalency and say like, well, there's collectivism on the one side and individualist cultures on the other side, and it's all just kind of like the same, pick and choose whichever one you want. But here's the difference that they don't understand because they're not conscious of God, is that who can become conscious of God and who can't? A collective cannot become conscious of God. A sports team can't become conscious of God together. And a church group cannot become conscious of God together. And, a corporation cannot become conscious of God. A corporation doesn't become awake. The only one who can become awake is you, because you're God. The corporation is not God. The Chinese Communist Party is not God. The Russian state is not God. You are God. That's a huge fucking difference. And that's a huge fucking oversight for these postmodernists who want to relativize everything as if it's all the same. It's not the same. Your university department is never going to have an awakening. Only you can have an awakening. But don't believe me, test it out for yourself. See, try to have your university department have an awakening. See how well that works for you. Don't let me put limiting beliefs into your mind. I want you to suffer the frustration of that firsthand. So this organization that you're going to be part of is going to have self-serving, groupthink that serves its survival. And this organization, everyone in it, will mostly be blind to this groupthink. They won't see it. Only you will see it. And if you're not careful, you're going to get sucked into this groupthink without even recognizing it. You're going to get boiled alive like a frog in water, slowly. Especially because your rent depends upon it. Realize that nearly everything you see or hear humans say is groupthink. All human intellectual, philosophical, and scientific work is mired in profound groupthink, which is why you can't take any of it too seriously. I can hardly even listen to intellectuals anymore. I try to find good intellectuals to listen to, but I immediately see through whatever strain of human groupthink they're conforming to. I see it, whether it's Marxism, libertarianism, or whatever, centrism. And that's not just political. Scientism, rationalism, AI doomerism. I can see that their mind is just doing mechanical survival. It's not self-aware. Everything here boils down to self-awareness. How self-aware are you? Once you become so self-aware that you realize that that you're acting not of your own volition, but these are just programs and viruses infecting your mind, this is a game changer. It's so huge. It opens you up to a whole new tier of intellectual development and understanding that just cannot be accessed otherwise. For example, I hear scientists, parroting evolutionary psychology, or a scientist parroting materialism, or a socialist parroting Marxism, or someone parroting Christianity, or someone parroting non-duality even, or someone parroting history, or parroting rationalism, or some super AGI fantasies. Don't underestimate the power of just observation. Observe people acting out of conformity. Just like sit for an hour and just watch people in a debate. Both of them just acting unconsciously. Conformity, 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 conformity. Just noticing that for what it really is eye-opening, and it will change you just in and of itself, that observation. You can assess the quality of someone's mind based on their ability to think autonomously. This is a powerful heuristic. Tier 2 cognition, spiral dynamics tier 2, is highly nonconformist. The higher you rise, the more nonconformist and more non-predictable you become. See, conformist minds are extremely predictable. They're like animals. Animals are easy to predict and trap because they're machines. Your mind only becomes unpredictable at tier 2. I understand a tier 1 mind better than the tier 1 mind understands itself. I understand a Christian mind, a Muslim mind, deeper than they understand themselves. I understand the mind of a Fox News host, of a Trump supporter, of a Marxist, of a scientist, of an academic, philosopher. I understand their minds better than they understand themselves. Why is that? Because I've had to do so much work to understand my own mind and my own self, and ultimately God and reality, that the insights that I got into that are so universal that you can see them in everybody. These are dynamics of the ego. Really, what I understand is the ego. The deeper I understand the ego, the more I see it in everybody else. Autonomous mind as a cognitive stage of development is an honest signal. It cannot be faked. You clearly see when a mind is not autonomous. It's very easy to see. But only once you've risen to that level. If you're at tier 1 still, spiral dynamics tier 1, you're gonna struggle with that to differentiate. That's why I create videos, for example, that show, I have a series called How to Distinguish Higher and Lower Perspectives. That's like a big list that helps you to see how to distinguish between the higher quality, lower quality perspectives, tier 1, tier 2. Science is poisoned by conformity. Scientists parrot ideas they learned, and they do not question science seriously. That's why you have stuff like scientism, rationalism, atheism, materialism, pragmatism. This is conformity. So look, get this. Atheism is conformity. Yeah. Imagine that. Really take that in. Really take that in. Atheism is nothing more than conformity. Huh. God damn, that's a powerful insight if you can have that insight. If you're an atheist and you're conscious enough and, objective enough to admit that to yourself, wow, that's a game changer right there. But how many atheists are open to that? See? Very few. Consider that your admiration for and loyalty to science is conformity. Our education system is a conformity mill. You are indoctrinated with academic norms and standards, STEM, standards of academic rigor. This is conformity. To be able to think at the quality level of an academic, but without the conformity, that's the ideal that we're aiming for. That's very difficult to achieve. Usually to have the kind of rigor of thinking that an academic has, you have to go through the whole academic system. But by the time you go through the whole academic system, you're so brainwashed by it that you're so paradigm locked that you're never going to break out of it. But the downside is that if you don't go through the academic system, then you're going to have sloppy thinking and sloppy epistemic standards. So it's tricky. It's not the case that just, not going to university. For example, the conservatives, they don't like universities because universities, destroy conservative dogma. So they like to homeschool their kids and, avoid university, but then you just become a stupid conservative. So that doesn't work either. So you need some kind of middle way. Here's an interesting key insight. Scientists do acknowledge this problem. They call it the sociology of science. This is sort of the conformity. All this conformity stuff I'm talking about, scientists will say, yeah, Leo, it's true, it exists. We call it the sociology of science. But they have no understanding of how deep this goes and how much of science is actually governed by conformity and groupthink. And ironically, this phrase, sociology of science itself becomes a kind of deception because it softens the point too much. And it hides the severity of this issue. And so people, scientists will say, yeah, the sociology of science, but and they say it in this kind of sort of flippant passing manner where it's not a big deal. And we can just, we can carry on doing physics and understanding reality. Just be careful not to get sidetracked into the sociology of science or get tricked into that. And then they'll say well, yeah, the sociology of science, that applies to stuff like the soft sciences, but it's not part of the hard sciences like physics or something. No, you're wrong. It is. It is. Science is much, much more prone to cultural bias and cultural distortion and groupthink than any scientist wants to admit, because it's way too threatening to admit that. Because fundamentally what a scientist is attached to is the idea that fundamentally science must be on solid ground. Yeah, sure, of course, there's some corruption in science, there's some wrong ideas, there's a little bit of self-deception, there's a little bit of, fudging the numbers, and a little bit of wrong theories, and a little bit of ego sneaks in there, and a little bit of sociology of science is in there. Yeah, surely all that, but fundamentally, science is rock solid, right? No, it's not. The belief in science, space, time, energy, birth and death is conformity. There's no such thing as time, and there's no such thing as space. And there's no such thing as birth, and there's no such thing as death. See, how do you even begin to teach that to somebody when their culture tells them that that is just reality? The groupthink in academia and universities is too strong to allow for serious philosophical work. The kind of work that would actually get you to God is not possible in those collective environments. Because there's so much inertia, you're going to have to be dragging the whole thing along with you. It's like trying to reform the military or trying to reform the CIA. Good luck reforming the CIA into a peaceful organization. It's not going to happen. Do you understand that the highest intelligence must be nonconformist? Why is the highest intelligence nonconformist? Because if you were infinitely intelligent, why would you need to conform to anything? You would operate completely on your own. You would be self-sufficient. You would be confident in your own intelligence. You wouldn't doubt yourself. High intelligence requires deeply questioning assumptions and seeing paradigms and frames. Because true intelligence is non-mechanical. It's not about copying something. It's not about going through an algorithm or a formula. It's not about regurgitating something like the way that a LLM does, these AI LLMs like ChatGPT. This is not true intelligence. Even though it's a pseudo-intelligence, it's not godlike intelligence. Godlike intelligence is infinitely integral. It unites everything into a single unity. It's not divided from itself. See, when you need others to tell you what's real, this breaks the unity of your mind. You see? Go watch my episode called How Authority Works, which elaborates on this topic. But basically, God is an absolute authority. It's a mind that tells itself what is real. It defines reality. It constructs reality. It makes reality. God is a reality, self-constructing consciousness. That's what it is. That means it imagines something and then it makes it real for its own self. And when you say, well, let me imagine this and let me ask my friend or my mom or my professor, is that real? Let me ask a scientist, is this real? Now, I'm imagining this unicorn, is this real? See, as soon as you do that, you have broken the unity of God. You've lost the power of God. The power of God is the ability to imagine a fucking unicorn, and there it is. Because you said so. That's what a dream is. In your dreams, when you're dreaming unicorns and shit, why are dreams so potent? Because you're completely bought into the dream. There's nobody there contradicting your dream. You don't need to ask a scientist inside of a dream, is this monster that's chasing me a real monster? No, you dream the monster and the monster becomes your reality. That's God. God is the infinite ability to dream anything, including a physical universe. The only reason you think a physical universe is real is because you are, in a way that you're not fully conscious of, you're telling yourself that it's real. You're constructing it for yourself, but you're not conscious of how you're constructing it. And so therefore you mistake it for an external reality. It's a projection. The highest intelligence is able to materialize physical reality, and it's also able to become so self-aware that it's able to see how it is doing it. The more conscious and intelligent you become, the more your intelligence is able to see how it is constructing all of reality, until there's nothing left but your own imagination. The highest intelligence makes new discoveries, which cannot be done through conformity. See, humans mistakenly think that IQ is the measure of intelligence, but IQ is outstripped by conformity. Your IQ might be high, but what is your stage of development? That's what really matters. And an IQ test does not measure your stage of development. That's why IQ tests are almost worthless. Here's a key insight for you, is that most academics, professionals are highly credentialed and technically proficient and well-trained, but are still fundamentally conformist in their entire ego development. Their mind is not fluid, open, flexible, intelligent enough to understand how their own mind is tricking itself, deceiving itself, creating illusions, projections. And in this way, they get lost in science, materialism, atheism, pragmatism, postmodernism, blah, 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 blah. There are many degrees to transcending conformity. The highest degrees are extremely rare and unknown to most intellectuals. Social media algorithms are fueling conformity and groupthink, and AI is making the situation even worse. Because people these days with AI, thanks to AI, are doing less and less independent thinking. And they are thinking that it doesn't matter, that there's no cost to this. But the AI is just the averaging of human thought. All it does is get you mediocre thought. This is the opposite of what you want. What you want is the opposite of AI. What you want is you want to be generating your own ideas. AI is making it like a crutch so that people think even less for themselves. And they just trust the AI now. Pretty soon it's going to get to the point where if the AI doesn't say that it's true, then you're just not going to believe it. Imagine how bad of a paradigm lock that becomes. See? The monkey see, monkey do dynamic is very powerful. Notice that you're unconsciously imitating others, whether it's celebrities, successful business leaders, politicians, social media influencers, actors, spiritual teachers. As an artist, you imitate other artists. Some of that is acceptable and necessary, but it goes way too far. Be very careful with that. Many of you unconsciously or even consciously try to imitate me, even though I'm a strange person with strange ideas and views and strange lifestyle, different genetics than you. So the stuff that works for me might not work for you. So be careful with that. If you value creativity, if you want to be a true, serious artist, you must value overcoming conformity. Nonconformity enables you to create new things that no one has ever created before. The greatest artists, scientists, researchers, explorers, inventors, directors, leaders, entrepreneurs, investors, philosophers were and are nonconformist. Nonconformity is essential to starting new innovative businesses, developing new technologies, breaking out of wage slavery and developing financial autonomy, very good investing, great leadership, new scientific discovery, and great art. The beauty of life is to find your unique self-expression. This is the point of art. You are alive to create something original that no one else could create but you. What is that thing for you? It will take you decades to figure that out, but it's also one of life's most rewarding pursuits, so I suggest you take it seriously. Great art is rare because most people are too conformist to come up with anything new ideas. What they're doing is they're just imitating others. That's what makes humans different than AI. Humans can truly generate a new idea, whereas an AI is doing something very sophisticated. I'm not saying AI is just a number crunching machine or whatever, or a monkey sitting at a typewriter, but the AI is interpolating between human ideas. It is not able, I've used a lot of AI, especially for art, and what you find if you use AI like Midjourney or something like that to generate truly novel art, it's not possible. The AI is not able to create, like for example, a totally new creature. What it does is it synthesizes parts of other creatures into something, and that something could be kind of new and kind of cool. It can be beautiful, no doubt about that, and it can even be useful for some project that you have. But it's not going to be a truly new creature. Whereas, for example, a human concept artist, and I've hired human concept artists in the past, not all of them are good, but the really good ones, they can truly create and invent a new creature. For example, like the xenomorph creature created by H.R. Geiger, that's creative genius right there. To create a xenomorph is an AI cannot create a xenomorph from scratch. It can copy a xenomorph. It can blend a xenomorph with, with a unicorn and create some sort of monstrosity that way, but it's not going to be a xenomorph, which is why AI is not replacing humans anytime soon. Now, maybe there's going to be some new breakthroughs in AI. That's a different subject, but I'm talking about current AI, LLMs as we have them now, the LLM architecture. How do you create an original film, book, song, video game, music, cuisine? This takes genuine creativity. Art, new discovery, innovation. Evolution requires new ways of thinking that contradict current intellectual norms. Imagine inventing a new system of government. Not neoliberalism, not libertarianism, not socialism, not Marxism, not communism. Something new, some new system, not even democracy. Some totally new system. What would that be? See, people are not even thinking in these terms. They're just thinking in these little boxes. Nonconformity allows you to discover the most amazing aspects of life. Amazing music, film, games, art, people, inventions, understandings, concepts, distinctions, places, experiences, businesses, technologies, books, websites, teachers, gurus, YouTube channels. Maybe you even discover Actualized.org. And nonconformity is just a much more satisfying way to live. It's a deeper way to live. See, conformity is shallow. Nonconformity is deep. And what I'm teaching is all about depth. It's depth of life. God is the deepest you can go in life. It's infinite depth. And to majorly change your position in life usually requires nonconformist ways. Like if you're stuck, let's say you're poor, you're in a bad situation in life, you're stuck in a miserable family, like in a miserable society, in a miserable country, in some third world part of the world, and you want to break out of it, some miserable religion. How do you seriously change your situation, improve your lot in life? That's going to require very unorthodox ways of thinking. Because if you're just going to take the standard orthodox conformist ways, you're going to get pretty mediocre results, and you're not going to change your position in life very high. You're not going to become super spiritual. You're not going to become super advanced. You're not going to become super intelligent. You're not going to become super rich and famous. Usually not. Although, of course, that's also possible. Like you could just be, a propagandist for the government in Saudi Arabia, and you could become a billionaire or a millionaire doing that. Sure, you could. There are many positions in life where, sucking up to somebody rich and powerful by enabling their corruption will make you rich and powerful and corrupt as well. That's a well-trodden path towards the top. So for sure. And in fact, maybe that's the best way to get the most wealth. But the problem is that you don't want the most wealth. What you really want is you want connection to God. You want connection to yourself. You want connection to the truth, not maximum wealth. See, the idea for maximum wealth, that's an idea you got from your culture. Here's a list of concrete examples of how I used autonomous thinking in my life to radically, improve my situation. For example, I used it for starting unique businesses and developing financial autonomy. I used it for challenging science, for challenging Western academic philosophy, for challenging non-duality and enlightenment intensives, for challenging Buddhist dogma, for challenging, indigenous shaman and paving the way for various kinds of new psychedelics and psychedelic techniques. I've used it for inventing new ways, finding new technologies, finding amazing things, discovering amazing books, teachers, music, concepts, distinctions, insights, techniques. Many of those I've shared, or I've shared them on my book list, I've shared them on the forum, I've shared them on the blog. Now here's some warnings about this topic, because I've been sort of like preaching the virtues of nonconformity, but we need some warnings and some sort of disclaimers. So the first warning is that there's a trap here of developing a sort of a nonconformist identity, because the ego loves the idea of being special. So you might think like, well, yeah, cool, Leo, I'm on board for being nonconformist. Who wants to be conformist? I want to be special. And then, so see, that then becomes an ego. And then your goal becomes then about nonconformity for its own sake and just being special and being different and being contrarian, just being queer just for the sake of being queer. And that would be a mistake, and that's going to lead to self-deception. So we're not after nonconformity for its own sake. We're after the goal of truth, authenticity, understanding, consciousness, reality, God, goodness, love, and insight. That's what we're after. And then nonconformity is going to be a great way to do that. And if you achieve all of that, you're going to be extremely unique just by achieving all that. But you don't need to try to be special because you already are special. You're infinitely unique. You're God. It doesn't get any better than that. You just need to realize it, right? Just realize it, and then you won't need to try to be special. Don't try to be queer. Try to be truth, God, love, and good. And the rest will fix itself. Another trap here is doing nonconformity in a conformist way. For example, anti-vax, MAGA, Nazis, racists, flat earthers, conspiracy theories, Goths, libertarians, all these people think that they're nonconformist when they are actually conformist. So be careful about that. Another trap here is joining some non-mainstream subculture and thinking that that makes you autonomous in your thinking. It doesn't. There are two types of conformity. The first is national culture conformity. So for example, American culture, Japanese culture, Islamic culture, that would be sort of the bigger conformity. And then there's a smaller conformity within the bigger conformity, which is some kind of subculture. Examples of subcultures are like, for example, Silicon Valley investor subculture, or Wall Street subculture, or gamer subculture, or the pickup subculture, or some fitness gym rat subculture, or the New Age. These would be subcultures. So people think that just because they don't participate in the large national culture and they go into one of these narrow subcultures like, let's say, pickup or gamer culture or the New Age, that they are being very contrarian and, alternative and non-mainstream and therefore non-conformist. No, you're conformist in the main culture and then you're also conformist in the subculture. And so just be aware of that. Be aware that there are costs to challenging conformity. It's not easy. That's why people don't do it. There will be friction for being a nonconformist. There's going to be higher emotional labor. You're going to have to stand up to more gaslighting and naysaying and demonizing and judging. People are going to misunderstand you more. I get misunderstood a lot for some of my nonconformist views. Nonconformity can also be dangerous and even lethal. So be careful, especially in third world, very corrupt places where they don't have a good legal system. You're really playing with fire. Like if you want to be nonconformist politically in Russia or Saudi Arabia, they're going to kill you. So think very carefully about that. But also consider that, lethal conformity is also lethal, like we said. Wars, cults, and so forth can be lethal. It's easier to get nonconformity wrong. You have to kind of like know what you're doing. Nonconformity, living a nonconformist life is like, it's almost like, you're disassembling a bomb. You better know what you're doing when you're disassembling a bomb or you're going to blow up. So if you're not comfortable being that kind of like self-driven, some people just aren't self-driven, I guess. And so for them, conformity is just the proper way to live. So I'm not suggesting that nonconformity is appropriate for everyone. You shouldn't conform to being nonconformist, like I say, but rather you should evaluate whether nonconformity is suitable for your personality, your lifestyle, your level of intellect, your genetics, whatever other factors you have in your life. But if you find my work appealing, then this will probably be up your alley, I would guess. But still, you have to, only you can know what's right. I can't know what's right for you. I don't even know you. I don't even know your name, right? Sometimes you guys think that I know more about you than I literally don't even know your real names. So how would I know what's appropriate for you? I'm putting out general ideas and then you have to assess whether it's right for you. I can't do that for you. That's your responsibility. Nonconformity can be socially isolating and lonely. It's going to be harder to socialize, harder to gain status, harder to win at politics, harder to get laid, harder to make friends. So all that human social stuff gets harder. That's why people conform. Also, be careful. Sometimes the crowd is right. Collective wisdom does exist. The crowd is not always stupid. Sometimes the crowd will know more than you. But collective stupidity, of course, is very common as well. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not trying to demonize the social element. Obviously, much good comes from collective thinking. Perhaps the quintessential example of is, for example, NASA. NASA landed a man on the moon. And if you actually watch the documentaries of the work that went into landing a man on the moon, the Apollo program, and don't even get me started with your stupid conspiracy theories about the fake moon landing. The Apollo if you look at the details of the Apollo program, look at the intelligence that went into that, the teamwork, how quickly they did it, the resources they marshaled, the intelligence, or even like, for example, the Manhattan Project with the nuclear weapons. I mean, it's incredible stuff. So in this episode, I've been focusing on the negatives of conformity a lot, but there's no way you could land a man on the moon by yourself. There are certain things, and in fact, most big things can only be done in a collective. So I'm not saying collaboration is bad. I'm not saying not to be part of collectives. I'm not demonizing corporations or being part of collectives. And I'm not telling you to be some kind of loner, some sort of Unabomber living in a shed in the woods. I'm just trying to make you aware of the very real limitations that being part of these collectives puts you in. Like, yes, you can send a man up to the moon, but in the end, is that really what's right for you? Is that what you really care about? Is that going to make you happy, sending a man to the moon? I mean, yeah, it's cool, it's very interesting and so forth. And, I'm all for space exploration and that kind of cutting edge science. But if I have to choose between that and God realization, I'm going to choose God realization. And I'm not saying that there's necessarily a choice. You could do both. But also there could be conflicts there, very serious conflicts. Maybe sending a man to the moon will make you such a believer in science and such an atheist that you won't even have an open enough mind to consider the possibility that you're God. So yes, collective, everything mankind has developed. It's easy to look at mankind and just say like, oh, there's all these atrocities and genocides and holocausts and stuff and war. But the reality is that that's like maybe 5% of mankind. The other 95% of mankind is all sorts of positive collective stuff, technologies we've developed, democracy and, agriculture and houses and cities, a lot of nice, beautiful stuff, entertainment, art, video games, beautiful stuff has been created. So for the most part, collective thinking does work, but sometimes it just breaks down really badly. And specifically when it comes to understanding God, it really breaks down badly, almost always, specifically. And so really the reason that I'm focusing on the negative so much here is because this is a spiritual channel. We're talking about spirituality. And I'm trying to make you God, so we have a bit of a bias here. So conformity is really the shadow of collective thinking. It's the negative, but then there's a big part of the collective that's good. And also, imitation, as a kind of a disclaimer, imitation, if you're a newbie, if you're just a newbie artist, a newbie musician, newbie film director, if you're just new to personal development, new to pickup, imitation is normal and healthy. It's okay for you to be imitating. Just don't get stuck in that forever. Imitate for a few years and then move out of it into your own, become your own artist, your own person. Okay, now let's talk about this issue of spirituality, because this is a very important topic. Conformity and spirituality. All of spirituality is infested and poisoned with conformity. This includes Orthodox religion, all tribal animistic shamanic traditions, all indigenous traditions and aboriginals, cults, the New Age, Buddhism, Zen, and yoga, non-duality, Vedanta, and even enlightenment. All of this is infested with conformity. The key insight for you is that enlightened and spiritual people are still highly conformist. And just because you have your enlightenment does not put you into the autonomous stage of cognition. 99% of all spiritual people have not achieved the autonomous stage. This includes the New Age, non-duality, enlightenment, Buddhists, Zen, and yoga. Meditation, yoga, prayer, self-inquiry are not enough to reach the autonomous stage. This requires contemplation and specifically thinking. One of the problems with Buddhism and some of these other teachings, Neo-Advaita and so forth, is that they tell you to not think, to stop thinking. They demonize thinking or they dismiss thinking. They don't teach you how to think. They don't explain to you the complexities of the spiritual domain. They think that, if you just sit on a couch and meditate, that's going to be enough for you to understand spirituality. No, that's wrong. Enlightenment and awakening does not automatically solve the problems of conformity and groupthink, or how to use the mind properly. It doesn't teach you epistemology. It doesn't even teach you ontology. And these are important topics. This is what cognitive development entails. And this is how cognitive development is different from just mystical development and experience. There is a big difference between conformist and autonomous spirituality. Why does this matter? It matters not just because you're going to be using your cognition for doing everything else in life that's not spiritual, material, running a business, family, everything, dealing with all your psychological problems. Not only that, but it even matters specifically for the purpose of awakening itself. The highest levels of God and love and intelligence and insight cannot be achieved through any kind of conformist spirituality. I only achieved my levels of understanding of consciousness, God, and reality by challenging all spiritual traditions, even the most advanced ones, even the best teachers and teachings. I'm not talking about the crap out there. I'm talking about the best of the best. I'm talking about Peter Ralston, Ken Wilber, Daniel Schmachtenberger, Jordan Hall, these tier 2, like very serious, the best intellectuals out there, the best spiritual teachers out there that I could find, integral spiral dynamics, people like Daniel Ingram, Shinzen Young, David Hawkins. I had to challenge and question all of that, and I found problems in every single one of their worldviews. All of them make mistakes. All of them fall prone to self-deception. All of them are closed-minded in certain ways. Even though I have a lot of respect for these sorts of teachers and teachings, and I recommend that you study them and learn as much as you can from them, but none of that is the highest level of, sovereignty of mind. How do you develop to the autonomous stage? Start by observing your own conformity. Do that auditing that I told you about. Lots of observation work. And observing the conformity of others. Observing the conformity in other cultures. Watch videos of other cultures. Study other cultures very deeply, in person, but also in video, because you can't visit all these places physically. And even if you do, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the kind of insights that you would get from watching a video. You're not going to, visit a war zone and so forth and talk to some sort of, murderous warlord, which you can watch on a video. Questioning. Really, it all boils down to questioning and contemplation. You question everything and you ask powerful questions and you ask more and more higher quality questions. And this is how you develop the autonomous stage. Also, very importantly, stop getting pleasure and meaning from being approved of by others. Stop needing their approval. This requires its own episode, how to stop caring about what others think of you. I have that episode, but I need to do a part 2 on that. It's kind of an oldie of mine. You need to change your lifestyle and your survival situation so you are more independent of the collective that you're a part of. If you are too attached to your collective, you won't be able to think independently enough. It's especially important that you bring your way of earning money under your own control and responsibility. If others hold the strings to how you pay your rent, then you're never going to be autonomous in your mind because you're always going to be their slave. Critically question every platitude, truism, quote, and claim in every book that you've ever read. All the books on my book list that you should be reading, you need to be questioning all that critically. Don't just read a book and accept it as true. You got to be questioning it, coming up with counter arguments. Catch yourself parroting phrases, ideas, truths, and authors, even parroting myself, and cut that off. You want to reach a point where you're generating your own ideas, not just repeating what you've been reading or hearing. You need more diversity of perspectives and experience. The more, the better, especially with other cultures, to break out of your bubble. One of the reasons I'm so nonconformist is because I experienced early on in my life Russian culture and then American culture. So I sound and look like I might be American, but it's kind of an illusion because I moved to America when I was 7 years old. So the beauty of that for me was that I saw that difference between Russian culture and American culture. And even though I integrated into American culture, I never fully merged with the American culture to the point where it became like my own identity. I'm not identified with being American or Russian or even human at this point. So the problem with most people is that most minds are stuck in some mother culture, the one that they were born into. I actually feel very sorry for Americans who were born in America because they don't even see, they're fish in water. They don't even see the water. Whereas moving to America at around age 7, that's like perfect. If I had kids, I would want to move them to a different country right around that time of age 7 so that they don't grow up in America fully immersed in American culture, because once you're so immersed in it, you can't see outside of it. It becomes your programming. So one of the best things you can do for your children is move them around multiple cultures so that they don't grow up with just one mother culture. That helps to shake that kind of paradigm lock of your own culture. It helps you to see that your culture is just one out of many, and it's not the one, the true, the best, and you're less attached to it. And the bottom line is just, look, spend hours and hours sitting alone in a room and contemplating. That's the gist of how you develop the autonomous stage. Also, a lot of psychedelics will help you too. That's actually quite crucial. You know, I wouldn't have been able to do it without psychedelics. So I'm just being straightforward with you. Here's a little exercise you can try. Sit down and just try to think of an original thought that no one has ever thought of before. You are capable of doing this, but it's a lot harder than you might think. Sit down and try to do it. Try to imagine something new. And when you imagine something new, try to watch how your mind is actually constructing it. And you'll see that your mind is kind of like lost and it doesn't know how. So it's going to start to pull. You can actually observe, develop enough self-reflection to observe that your mind is going to be pulling together other sources that you're familiar with. Like maybe you'll pull together a unicorn with a xenomorph, and you'll try to combine them in your mind into some sort of, new object. But then you see, oh, that's not truly original because you're combining two things in this kind of simplistic way. But then again, it's also very interesting to kind of wonder, like, well, how does the mind generate truly new ideas? Is that even possible? Or are all new ideas just agglomerations of past ideas? That's something I want you to contemplate for yourself. And don't just speculate about it. Actually try to do it and observe yourself doing it and see, what does it take to come up with just a new idea? Like for example, to make this a little more concrete, like a new idea for a new video game that no one has ever made before. A new genre of video game. Can you come up with one? Or a new type of film, a new story that no one has told before, like a new horror film, or a new alien film, a new sci-fi film. And the goal should be to try to make it as new and original and different from anything that's been done before as possible. And just, that's a really powerful exercise. If you can do that, give it a shot. So as we're wrapping up here, one of my superpowers is the ability to think profoundly independently. Innovation is one of my top values. And that's what you see in all of my work, is that I'm not just reading books and repeating what I read in a book to you. I used to do that when I first started, even though I had my own ideas back then as well. But, you have to start somewhere. But at this point, in the last couple of years, I reached a point where everything I say, even though, of course, I still read a lot of books and I take in and I watch a lot of videos and I listen to a lot of people. But like when I'm giving a talk now, it's truly my own. Like I've made it my own. It's coming from my own understanding, my own model of reality of God. And that's what makes it so powerful and potent. But it took 10 years to build up to this, 10 years of making these videos. And notice how powerful that is. You can take that and you can apply that in any field. I did it in this particular field of self-actualization, self-development, spirituality, but you can do this in any field. You can do this in Hollywood. You can do this with investing. You can do this in crypto. You can do this in real estate. You can do this in accounting. You can do this in sales. You can do this in marketing, whatever. There's no limit to creativity and to imagination. That's the power of God. Why is Actualized.org so unique and potent as a teaching? Because I achieved autonomous mind. I can think completely independently of any culture, including science, materialism, academia, Western philosophy, Buddhism, non-duality, New Age, leftism, centrism, conservatism, integral, spiral dynamics even. The New Age, non-duality, American culture, Russian culture, doesn't matter. Humanity, independent of humanity. That took me like 20 years of philosophical work to achieve. And it only happened really truly thanks to psychedelics. Of course, not only psychedelics, all the other work mattered, but psychedelics were really crucial in that. I developed such a profound autonomy of mind that I realized that even Buddhism and non-duality and enlightenment was conformity. Why am I so intelligent? It's not because I have a high IQ. It's because I think totally autonomously. I question everything. Even academics and PhDs are not able to do this. They are still thinking in conformist ways. They aren't questioning human biases and conventions and norms nearly deeply enough. I embody nonconformist living and thinking. And notice that I embody it in a healthy way. I don't preach any conspiracy theories to you or any wacky ideologies. That would be fake, toxic kind of nonconformity. What I do is I teach mankind how to actually achieve sovereignty of mind, complete sovereignty of mind, to the point where you actually become God. This is not just the autonomous stage as described on the Susan Cook-Greuter model, and it's not even the unitive stage, it's beyond the unitive stage. Susan Cook-Greuter does not have enough autonomy to even understand the things that I am talking about. The unitive stage is still not autonomous enough. You need to reach such a high degree of mental autonomy that you even transcend human sanity. I reached such a degree of autonomy and understanding of consciousness that I became conscious of alien awakening, alien consciousness. This is a level of consciousness that nobody teaches and nobody comprehends. It's not even describable in human terms. It doesn't fit any human category. It doesn't fit non-duality. It doesn't fit enlightenment. It doesn't fit Buddhism. It doesn't fit yoga. It doesn't fit any of that. It's a completely different terrain of consciousness. Indescribable in human terms. And yet I will be teaching it in the future. So that's what's possible. Your mind becomes so independent of any human ideas that you're literally able to imagine entire new domains of consciousness that no one has ever imagined before. It's not just that I discovered, alien consciousness. It's that I literally invented it for myself. And to even understand that you're able to invent new domains of consciousness and new domains of spirituality that no one has invented before, to know that you have that power, that itself requires such a powerful autonomy of mind. Because there's no one you can ask to tell you, have I lost my mind? Is this right? Is this true? Does this really exist? Is this really real? Or am I just hallucinating? See, there's none of that. You're so autonomous that you don't need any of that. So one of my jobs and goals is to help people reach that stage, for real, to reach that stage. Now, obviously, this topic brings up an interesting self-reference problem. Obviously, Actualized.org itself cannot be a conformist activity, because if it is, then it fails at what it's trying to do. My haters love to accuse me of running a cult, but actually, I'm one of the only people on this planet who teaches how to reach full autonomy of mind. But obviously, that requires your participation, because you could turn all of this work into just ideology and beliefs and conformity. Not only is Actualized.org not a cult, Actualized.org is the most non-cult thing that there is. Cults are antithetical to everything I teach, which is why all my intellectual work is designed to keep you out of groupthink. And what is a cult? A cult just is conformity and groupthink. That's all a cult is. The only reason people fall into cults is because of conformity. There's no other reason. If you learn the principles that I'm teaching you here, you will be immune to all cults. And not just that, but you'll also transcend the larger culture that is mainstream culture. And ironically, the people who call Actualized.org a cult are themselves doing unconscious groupthink when they say that, because the term cult, death cult, cult leader, these are just mental cliches used by unconscious conformist minds. Because they don't understand what I'm teaching, they need to explain it to themselves somehow, so they just say, oh, that's just another cult. Right? Real thinking is not happening. They're not actually engaging with what I'm saying. Now, a final warning here is that when I say to be nonconformist, I really mean it. I actually mean reaching autonomous stage of cognition. I do not mean adopting a nonconformist belief system, and I do not mean parroting the things that I say as an ideology. So those are different things. You are capable of achieving autonomous cognition, independent of human society and culture and all that stuff. That's possible, but it's going to take quite a bit of work. And I recommend that you make it a major goal in your life to develop your mind to that kind of level. And for more help on that, stick with me, because every episode I release is slowly building you up towards that. You know, one brick at a time. We're building the foundation one brick at a time towards this goal. Okay, that's it. I'm done here. Check out, what do I got? What I got to offer you? Check out my book list. Check out the Life Purpose course. Check out the blog. I've been having some technical problems on the blog. That's why I haven't been updating it. It's not because I've been lazy. I have a lot more that I'll be posting soon. I'll fix the technical problems. I've just been kind of hung up on a lot of backlog of work. So that's coming. And I just want to say a final point to you guys here. It's this. Look, Actualized.org is a very long-term project. I've been doing this for about 12, 13 years now, building this catalog of concepts for understanding reality. And you might say, well, okay, Leo, so you're kind of done, right? No, there's still a lot more. My best work is yet to come. And I've been releasing less content, less frequently, just because health problems and also exhaustion, a bit of burnout, and just the topics are getting more challenging, and my standards for the quality have risen. So there's various factors here. But no matter how slow my output is, remember, this is not about speed. This is designed to be a catalog of concepts for the rest of your life that you can learn from, you can keep coming back to and learning from, and I'll be introducing and sharing my best insights and new insights, forever, basically. So what I suggest for you is just to stick with me for the very long term. Don't treat this as like, oh, okay, I'm just going to watch a few self-help videos and I'm just going to move on. Because there's nothing better you're going to move on to. You're not going to find anything better than this in your life. There's nothing more worthwhile. Which is not to say that there's not good teachers and good channels out there. There's plenty of good stuff out there, and I encourage you to explore all of it. But honestly, you're not going to find anything more meaningful in your life than this. So my teachings are just now starting to really finally come into their full flower, into their full power. My understanding has reached a sort of a critical mass, and there's so much profound stuff that I have yet to teach you. There's still hundreds of videos that I'm working on and I'm preparing. So please be patient with me. It's going to take a little bit longer to get all of them out there. I can't keep pumping them out once every week or even 2 weeks. It's going to take longer than that because they require quite a bit of preparation and thought to get them to this level of quality that they need to be at. And just remember, this is a very long-term project. As you're working on your life, building it piece by piece, you're going to be building it over decades. And I'm going to be building Actualized.org over decades, so it fits. This is going to be fine. We're going to spend decades doing this, maybe the rest of our lives doing this. So I just want to remind you, throughout this process, you're going to feel tired sometimes. Sometimes you're going to get sick of self-help and spirituality, and you're going to quit, and you're going to go away. Maybe you're going to take a 6-month break, a year-long break, whatever. That's fine. I don't expect you to be consistent for decades like that. I've taken those breaks myself. But here's the key. Don't permanently ever fall off track. Always bring yourself back. So remind yourself that, look, okay, I'm sick of self-help and I'm sick of Leo and I'm sick of Actualized.org. I'm sick of this fucking God talk. I'm just going to go, have sex and I'm going to go make a bunch of money. But then always tell yourself, but I'm going to come back. 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 2 years from now, I'm going to come back because this is the most important. These are the most important concepts. This is what life is really about. This is the real juice of life here. So yes, you're going to get a little bit distracted here and there, and you're going to get a little bit pissed off, and maybe you'll get pissed off at me sometimes. Maybe you'll hate me for a few months. Remember to come back. You're going to come back. Next year, you're going to come back, and I'm going to have more videos for you. They're going to be even better, even juicier. And also, when you come back and you watch the old videos, they're going to have more power as well. Every year you do some self-development work and then you come back and you watch an old episode, you're going to learn new insights. There's so much depth to every single one of these episodes that you can watch it twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times throughout the rest of your life, and you're going to get more and more insight from it. You're going to see more nuances. That's how I try to make this work. And that's why it takes so much effort and time to put this stuff together, because I want it to be, this is supposed to be like evergreen content. This is a video, someone can watch this video 100 years from now, and they can watch it 5 times in a row, and each time they watch it, it'll just get truer and truer and truer and truer. That's how I want to structure my content going forward. And it already has been that way for quite a while, but we're just going to keep building and building on that. All right. Happy Halloween.